Hello, dreamers, and welcome back to the Dreamer's Vault. Tonight, I'm unlocking a story meant to keep your mind curious and your body calm. And don't worry, no mid-ads. Once we begin, the story will play through without interruption. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you relax, tap like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Now, get cozy, lower the lights, and let's drift into the dark together. Story 1. A story to scare my son. The world changes quietly when the sun goes down and the house grows still. Tonight I decided it was time for a talk with my son, a story about the dangers waiting behind soft screens and blinking lights. I meant it to be a lesson, but sometimes stories slip through the cracks and the shadows grow deeper than we plan. Father and son. It was a gentle evening, the kind that presses silence up against the windows, the air heavy with the hum of electronics. My son sat cross-legged on the living room roof, his small hands dancing over the keys of his laptop. Minecraft's pixelated world shimmered on the screen, chat messages streaming like drifting fireflies. Little voices, so many voices, all hidden behind nicknames and blocky avatars. I knelt down beside him, my knees creaking against the old hardwood. Son, can you pause your game for a minute? He hesitated, finished placing a final block, and closed his laptop with a soft sigh. His eyes, so like mine, finding me with a half smile and a hint of challenge. Is this another one of your scary stories, Dad? There was teasing in his voice, but underneath, a child's curiosity, the same boy who once hid under blankets when my stories drifted into the dark. I feigned offense, but couldn't help a wry smile. Don't you like my stories anymore? He shrugged, folding his arms, older than he was, and still so small. They're not scary now. Not really, but if you're going to tell me something about the internet, make it really scary. His words were bold, but his eyes betrayed a small flicker of hope for a story that might still make the shadows shiver. So I began, a cautionary tale. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Colby. He was 10, just like you. Colby loved games. He spent hours exploring online worlds, building castles, making friends in chat boxes that blinked late into the night. One friend in particular, Helper 23, stood out. They laughed together, shared secrets and jokes, the kind only kids would understand. Their friendship grew in the silent hours, pixels glowing against the dark. One day, Helper 23 wanted to send Colby a real birthday present, a cool surprise. All he needed was Colby's address, just between friends. Helper 23 promised, not a word to grown-ups, not even my own parents. Colby hesitated, but the offer sparkled with excitement, and so, with a promise sealed in digital whispers, he sent his home address out across the void. I paused my story and looked at my son, my voice quiet, almost a whisper. Do you think that was safe? He shook his head. No, of course not. But his eyes were wider now, drawn in. The growing guilt that night, as Colby lay in bed, the guilt started to grow, a silent, heavy thing creeping in the corners of his room. He heard every noise, the distant washing machine, the whisper of wind against the glass, the soft sigh of the baby in the nursery, down the hall. Somewhere deeper, other sounds faint, almost imagined, scratches, breaths, the house settling in ways it never had before. He waited for his parents to come tuck him in, heart thumping behind his ribs. The hallway light cast a thin yellow sliver across the floorboards, stretching toward his door. Hey, Dad, Colby called, voice trembling. I need to tell you something. His father's face appeared in the doorway, just ahead, cocked at a strange angle. In the dimness, his eyes shone too bright, his mouth too wide, unmoving. Yes, son? The voice sounded raw, faintly echoing, drawn out, too high, too thin. Are you okay, Dad? A pause. Uh-huh. A second head popped into view below the first, his mother's smiling with an unnatural sharpness, her voice like glass. Were you about to tell us you gave our address to Helper 23? You know we warned you about that. Colby felt the world tilt, felt the covers pressed tighter around him, his breath short, icy at the back of his throat. You shouldn't have done that, his mother sang, eyes wide and empty. He wasn't a kid, he only pretended he wanted to meet you. So he broke in, and her smile never faltered. He killed us, Colby, just so he could spend time with you. From behind them, a figure stepped into the room, a heavy-set man, his coat soaked and glistening. He carried two severed heads, blood trailing in uneven drops on the floor. He dropped them at Colby's feet with a dull, meaty thud, then drew a long, gleaming knife. Colby screamed. My son screamed, twisting, clutching at his own face, eyes squeezed shut. But the story wasn't finished. Deeper into the nightmare. The killer worked through the night, his knife carving silence from Colby's cries. By the time morning light slipped through the curtains, Colby's screams had faded to wet, shuddering gasps. From the nursery, a baby's wail broke the stillness. The killer paused, blade dripping, and followed the sound down the hallway, his shadow stretching long across the wallpaper. He lifted the baby from its crib, holding it for the first time, his bloody hands wiped clean on a soft blanket. The baby stared up, unafraid, blue eyes wide, a faint smile blooming. Something changed in the man's face, a shiver of emotion, soft and strange. He left the house, the baby nestled in his arms, and raised the child as his own, in the quiet hush of a world gone wrong. The lesson unravels when I finished. The room was silent. My son's breath came ragged, his face pale and frightened. But Dad, he whispered, my name's William. I smiled soft, sad, tired, and tousled his hair, trying to gather the pieces of the story back inside myself. Of course it is, son. He ran up the stairs, the echoes of his sobs bouncing through the house, and I was left alone, listening to the hush, the shadows deepening, wondering if I had told the story to teach him, or if it was the only way I could warn him about dangers that sometimes slip quietly through the cracks between the worlds we know. Here's a tale to keep you company in the dark. Story 2. All 18 Lives of Omen, the Cat. There's something strange about the way a cat can watch a house, the way it seems to know, with quiet certainty, things the rest of us could never see. I suppose that's why, even now when the night settles on our old family home and the wind rattles the windows, I sometimes hear Omen's soft, impossible purring, flirting through the dark. The arrival. It began, as these stories do, with death and with birth. Our old tabby, Nancy, slipped away one wet spring night, leaving behind a single trembling kitten. It was pink, blind, its limbs clumsy and thin, but it was the two heads that stilled the room. One small body, two perfectly formed feline faces, both turned to us, blinking in different directions. Purr, who never wasted a word, just muttered, "It's an omen." And I asked, quietly, an omen of what? No one knew, but we all felt it, a hush that lingered, the sense of a message half heard. The vet's face blanched when he saw Omen. He muttered about mutations, about labs and museums, about quick cash. We refused. Omen was ours. As we left, the vet, with a smirk, joked, 9 lives, if you're lucky. Pa, staring at Omen's two small heads, only replied 18. 18 lives. 2. Growing? We fed Omen by hand, each head desperate, hungry, their mouths slick with warm milk. Ma called it feeding the twins, and joked about 2 stomachs, 2 appetites. Nights blurred into mornings, and sometimes I'd sneak from my room just to sit cross-legged on the floor, holding 2 small bottles feeling the soft press of Omen's body in my lap. They grew sleek, black fur, white paws, a tiny cream mark crowning the left head. When the room was quiet, I'd catch them mewing to each other, their voices curling together in secret languages only cats can know. 3. A message on the morning before Omen's first birthday. The world changed again. He dragged in a two-headed mouse, limp and uncanny, its tiny forms curled together in a silent knot. I bent over it, heart pounding with fascination and fear. Behind me, Pea stood with Ma, hands on hips, their faces grave. "A message, Pea," said softly. Omen's heads both mewed, perfectly in sync. 4. Time unwound. We went away once, just for a week, sunburned and tired when we returned. Every clock in the house was smashed, glass and metal scattered like bones across the floors. Omen watched us from the windowsill, calm as ever, as if time itself had shifted in our absence. 5. The gifts, there were other gifts too. Birds, beetles, the bottom half of a squirrel, its innards red and slick. Omen always dropped them at our feet, waiting for praise, waiting for understanding. Pa said, "He thinks we're hungry." I think Omen wanted to remind us of what we were: flesh, blood, living things with appetites and fears. 6. Vigil. When Uncle came to die, Omen took up a silent vigil by his bed, refusing food, refusing to be moved. Both heads watched the door, their eyes following shadows that the rest of us could not see. When the end came, Omen mewed, softly, the sound swelling until the air trembled. Uncle nodded, greeting someone none of us could see, and was gone. 7. The twins. Mott sneezed twice the day she told us she was pregnant. Omen did too, one for each head. "Twins," Major said, and Omen purred, their chins tilted up, eyes bright. When the babies came home, Omen watched over them, fascinated by their tiny fists, the way their mouths opened in silent oath. 2 of them, Omen seemed to think, just like us. 8. Blood. A neighbor's child fell, cracked his head on the stone wall at the edge of their garden. Omen was there, lapping at the blood, eyes glazed. The child died. Omen came home, the fur around both mouths red and matted, and turned away from the dinner bowl that night. Full 9. The woman. One day, an old woman with skin like melting wax knocked on our door. She said she'd seen our cat and would pay good money to take it. She called Omen bad luck, devil touched. We refused. She spat on our door. "I'll see you soon," she whispered. 10. At the windows that night I woke to the sound of pounding, first at the door, then at every window. Everywhere I looked, I saw her face pressed against the glass, lips mouthing, "Let me in, let me in." There were so many of her multiplying in the darkness. I hid under the table, heart thumping. Omen sat by the door, tail flicking, heads pressed together, whispering in low, urgent mews. 11. The mirror. A week later, brushing my teeth, I heard scratching at the bathroom door. Omen wanted in, wanted the water pooled on the tiles. I ignored them. In the mirror, I saw the door slowly creak open, and a hand, old and gnarled, slid through the gap, followed by that sagging face grinning, reaching for me. My heart hammered as I stumbled back, grabbing the nearest heavy thing, my alarm clock, and hurled it at the glass. It shattered. Omen sat among the shards, 2 faces reflected 100 times over, pushed their forehead to mine for one long, shivering moment, then slipped away, silent as a shadow. 12. The strange man. The twins were followed home once by a thin man in a long coat and slicked back hair. Marcus found him at the gate, muttering prayers, eyes locked on Omen, lips moving, hands shaking. He wouldn't leave until the police came. Later, he was found in the river, pockets full of stones. Omen coughed up a blonde hairball, then curled up and slept. 13. Small mysteries. Omen discovered catnip and fell into a stupor, spent days watching their own reflections. When Ma caught them, embarrassed, Omen quit. Sometimes they'd bring in the top half of a squirrel, as if finishing what they'd started long ago. The twins would laugh. Pa would say, "Looks familiar," and Mai would shiver, deja vu ghosting through the room. 14. The vet. Omen grew thin, grew quiet. At the vet, the doctor rolled up her sleeve to show us a tattoo. A two-headed cat. "It's just like yours," she smiled. But her eyes and Omen's met in a long, wordless glance. 15. The last night's Omen spent 5 nights visiting each of us. Père, then Ma, then the twins, then finally me. They slept on my chest, warm and weightless, purring like a memory of fire. In the final hours, Omen padded through the house, checking every shadow, every open door, as if making sure the house and all its souls were safe. We buried Omen under their favorite tree, in a box lined with torn newspaper. Above it, we planted a single white orchid, soft trembling in the wind. A month later, 2 green buds pushed up from the soil, like eyes, like promises, like Omen themselves, watching over us still. Next comes a story wrapped in shadows. Story 3. Attention shoppers. Please hide at the back of the store immediately. Have you ever found yourself in a place so ordinary that the edges start to blur, where the soft hum of fluorescent lights is so familiar it could hide anything, where even your own reflection, caught in a pane of glass or the flicker of a security screen, seems a little off? This is a story about a late-night Walmart trip and how sometimes the ordinary world can unravel in the time it takes for an intercom to crackle to life. The ordinary night, it was 10 minutes before closing, one of those nights when the world felt heavy, storm clouds sagging at the edge of town, the air still and expectant. We'd brought our 2 boys out, hoping the miles of linoleum would tire them out, but all we'd gotten was whining and half-hearted tantrums, their voices rising and falling between the shelves. The store felt empty. Strange, how the quiet settles in when it's almost closing time. A handful of other shoppers drifted between aisles, their faces drawn and tired, pushing carts that rattled quietly, lost in their own private worlds. I remember thinking as I scooped Tucker up, how odd it felt to be here, in the belly of this glowing windowless place, with rain tapping at the roof. That's when the intercom clicked on. The announcement, "Attention shoppers." A male voice, calm, unfamiliar. "Please move to the back of the store immediately." For a moment, it felt like a mistake. The way he said it, like someone announcing a blue light special or an end cap clearance. Just a little too casual, a little too rehearsed. Daniel looked at me, brow furrowed. The back of the store? He was thinking what I was thinking. Don't you mean the front? Isn't that where we're supposed to go to pay, to leave, to be safe? The voice came again, a little more urgent. "This is not a drill. Please move to the back of the store immediately." I could feel the tension in the air begin to ripple. Shoppers glancing up, frowning, murmuring to one another. An old woman looked straight at the ceiling, her lips barely moving. Somewhere a cart clattered to a stop. Unease, I heard someone say tornado, that a storm had touched down nearby. Outside, the wind was picking up, pressing itself flat against the glass. But something about the voice, the way he didn't say storm or weather, the way he kept repeating, "Do not stay out in the open." I repeat, "Do not stay out in the open." It was as if the words were shaped for something else, something that lived in the hush between the aisles, in the long, echoing corridors of this endless store. People started moving, quickening their steps, the wheels of their carts whining against the tile. I scooped Tucker closer, felt Daniel's hand wrap around Jackson's shoulder. We drifted towards electronics screens glowing in the half-dark, our reflections multiplying and vanishing in the glass. Instructions change overhead. The voice returned, Stay away from windows and doors. Do not attempt to exit the store. A sharp chill crawled down my back. Daniel whispered, I'm going to check in the back. See if there's a break room or something. Stay here. His words were gentle, but brittle. I nodded, feeling the linoleum cold through my jeans as I sank to the floor, back against a rack of video games. Tucker sucked his bottle, his eyes wide and glassy. Jackson giggled, nervous energy making him giddy. Will everything go flying, Mom, like in the movies? I pressed a hand to his hair. I don't know. Outside, the storm pressed closer, but inside, the store had grown too quiet. A stranger-toned Daniel returned, breathless. Everything's locked up. No one's in the back, but we'll be okay. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe anything in that moment except the creeping sense that nothing about this was right. Then the intercom crackled again. Do not make yourself visible. That includes security cameras. Please move to a spot that is not visible to any cameras. I looked up those black globes in the ceiling, red lights winking like the eyes of insects. Hiding, we slipped through abandoned aisles. The boys pressed between us. Past carts tipped sideways, groceries scattered, the detritus of interrupted lives. We ducked into the Easter aisle. Plastic grass, lopsided bunnies, staring with painted-on grins. Here the camera couldn't see us. The air smelled like sugar and dust, the world so silent that my own breath sounded like static. I tore open a bag of chocolate eggs, pressed them into Jackson's hands. His small fingers closed around them. Quiet at last. It gets stranger. A mechanical whine overhead. Then the intercom. Keep away from aisles with food. If you have any food with you, leave it and move to a new hiding place. If you have any open wounds, cover them. I stared at Daniel. What the hell does that have to do with a tornado? He shook his head, eyes wide, searching the ceiling as if the answer might be written in the whorls of fluorescent light. We should run for it, he whispered. I started to protest, but the voice overhead, assume a fetal position and place your hands on your head. Close your eyes and do not open them for any reason. We ran. The front doors. The doors didn't open. We slammed against them, Daniel pounding, me clawing at the edge of the glass. Outside, the world was motionless. A single tree in the parking lot, perfectly still in the glow of the street lamp. Jackson whimpered, Tucker's cries growing louder. I turned and saw him, the Walmart employee, blue vest, gold starburst, sitting on the floor at the end of the checkout aisle, his back to us, head bowed, hands moving in slow, jerking motions. Hey, let us out. No response. A wet smacking sound, soft, rhythmic, wrong. I realized he was eating, or trying to. The intercom crackled. Attention, please do not talk to any Walmart employees. A cold wash of dread down my spine. The man paused, then began to stand, slowly, joints creaking, palms leaving bloody smears on the conveyor belt. I tried to move, but it felt like the floor was made of tar. Daniel's hand locked on my arm. Come on. We ran, hiding again. We crashed through racks of clothing, breath coming in short gasps. Daniel yanked open the dressing room door. All four of us squeezed inside, the lock sliding home with a soft click. Outside, silence, then a shuffle of feet. A shadow moved beneath the door. I held my breath, Jackson trembling against my side. A hand appeared, blood-stained, fingers spread, searching along the floor. Then, a face pale and warped, lips stretched into a grin too wide for a human mouth, eyes milk-white and vacant. I opened my mouth to scream, but the overhead voice spoke, calm as ever, the return to normal. Attention shoppers. Please make your way to the front of the store and make your final purchases. We will be closing in 10 minutes. And just like that, the thing was gone, dragged away by something unseen. the dressing room falling silent, except for Tucker's cries. Minutes passed. We waited. The store outside grew louder. Voices, carts rolling, beeps, and laughter. When we unlocked the door, everything was normal. Shoppers queued at the registers. Employees scanned items. Doors slid open without resistance. I caught sight of the old man who'd warned us before. What was that? I asked. He shrugged. I guess the tornado missed us. What a miracle, huh? He smiled and walked out into the dark. Sometimes late at night, I find myself listening for the sound of the intercom, the hush that follows, the way ordinary life can twist in the flicker of a light. And I wonder, if I'd opened my eyes, what would I have seen? Here's a memory someone can't quite forget. Story 4, Room 733. The Suicide Room. Some places never want to be forgot. It's easy to believe a dorm room is just a box of painted cinder blocks and cheap carpet. 4 walls to keep out the world. But sometimes a room remembers. Sometimes a room is hungry. When I was a freshman, I lived next door to a room the campus called the Suicide Room. This is how the shadow of room 733 crept into our lives and never really let go. Arrival. The whisper of legend. We arrived on campus under soft gray September clouds, the air bright with new beginnings, nerves fluttering in our stomachs. Lydia, my oldest friend, and I, side by side carrying boxes, arguing over posters, marveling that we'd ended up together after all. The dorm was old, brick and ivy, and the lingering scent of floor wax. Our room 734 was small, high-ceilinged with a tiny window pressed into one corner. It looked out over the north wing. We laughed about the size, about the creaky pipes, about how the walls were thin enough to hear the faintest laughter, or music, or tears. It was Lydia who noticed the empty room at the end of the hall. Its door closed tight, a heavy lock on the outside. Room 733. The resident advisor, Beth Sunny, nervous, too loud, told us the story on our very first day, as if she wanted to let the air out of the secret. There were incidents, she said, voice hushed, eyes flicking away, a jumper. Nobody's assigned to that room anymore. She shrugged, as if that explained everything. Anyway, no boys after 11. It's an old building, but there's lots of history here. She left us with that. The history. We tried to laugh it off, but even Lydia's jokes trailed into silence. At night, I would stare at the small square window and imagine how the darkness must gather in the locked, empty room beside us. The first sounds, distant and wrong, the first few weeks we were too busy to think about it. Classes, parties, the swirl of new faces and late nights. But soon, as September faded into October and the halls grew quieter, I began to notice things. A grinding sound, metal on metal, sometimes woke me in the dark. At first I thought it was someone in the hall, or the wind rattling the old frames. But then came the slow, deliberate slam of a window next door, over and over in the silence between midnight and dawn. Lydia tried to brush it off. It's an old building. Pipe, drafts, ghosts, if you're lucky. But the sound haunted me, a scraping, sliding as if someone or something was trapped on the other side of that locked door, desperate to open a way out. Sometimes I pressed my ear to our wall, listening for voices, for movement. All I heard was breathing, soft and steady, and not my own. The whispering walls. Other things changed, so gradually I barely noticed. Small, cold drafts seemed to slip under our door, even when the hall was still. Some nights, as I drifted between sleep and waking, I thought I heard marbles rolling across the floor next door, a cascade of tiny clicks that made my heart jump. Then one night came the whispering, a hush of voices, so faint I thought I was dreaming, until Lydia woke, eyes wide and frightened, finger pressed to her lips. We listened together, breath held, as words seemed to bleed through the wall, tangled and old and impossible to understand. Never taken mouths of fools. I had to convince myself it was the wind, or laughter from the stairwell, but I could hear the words forming, shaping themselves against the thin plaster between our beds. The supply room I grew bolder as the fear twisted inside me. One sleepless night, I stomped into the hall, anger drowning out my trembling hands. I banged on the heavy door to room 733, now marked supply room, locked and padlocked, and sealed with decades of campus secrets. No answer, only the echo of my own heart pounding in the corridor. I knelt down, pressing my face to the chill of the linoleum, and peered under the thin line beneath the door. The room inside was dust and shadow, moonlight falling across old broken furniture, bed frames, chairs, a tangle of forgotten mattresses. But the windows, two of them, wide and empty, were open to the night, letting in nothing but the cold. As I stared, something moved just for a moment. A glint of yellow reflected back at me, too close, too alive. I scrambled backward, heart slamming, unable to breathe. Escalation. Madness creeping in from that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that the room was watching us, that the stories, those incidents weren't finished, only waiting. We started sleeping elsewhere, never alone, never after dark. I found myself searching campus forums for answers, finding nothing but old rumors, all circling the same truth. Room 733 was a wound, a place where something ancient and clever waited, hungry for attention. Even the paranormal society, well-meaning, awkward, a little too eager for the thrill, could offer only the same warnings. A vengeful spirit, something that needs revenge, or souls, or both. I wanted to scoff. Lydia did, but when we'd leave our room in the day, we'd glance at the door and the padlock and wonder if a lock could hold back what we felt lurking inside. The history, the warning a student named Alice, wise beyond her years and wearing the look of someone who'd read too much, gave us what answers she could. 5 suicides. Not 2, not 3, 5. Every few years the room would be quietly reassigned to someone new, and every few years the university would try to cover up another death. Hushed stories, paintings and writings found in the room, too disturbing to be described. And always the sense that the thing inside, whatever it was, thrived on isolation, on being noticed, on being feared. Don't go in, Alice told me. It's smarter than you, trickier. If you see anything, anything at all, do not trust it. Do not go near it. Promise me you won't. I promised, but my words felt thin and fragile. The night it came for us that last week, with the promise of transfer and escape finally in sight, I returned to the room to pack, thinking Lydia was safe elsewhere, thinking we could survive a few more days. The afternoon sunlight was weak as I stood at my mirror drying my hair, music loud in my ears to keep the silence at bay. But when I flipped my head up, the room reflected back at me, wasn't my own. The mirror showed dust and empty bed frames and the wide black mouth of room 733's windows open, hungry, waiting. I turned, but my room was unchanged. When I looked back, something moved behind me in the mirror, a shadow, a promise, a memory of yellow eyes. I ran. I ran before I could change my mind. The final night. It was Lydia who went back, alone. A fight, a bad night, a voicemail left unfinished. By the time I returned, by the time I realized which room was truly the suicide room, it was too late. She was gone, lost to the empty air and the darkness that crouched behind glass. In the silence that followed, I found her sketches scattered across the floor, each one more terrible than the last. I cannot tell you what she drew, only that when I looked at them, I felt something in me snap. One last drawing slid from beneath the closet door, a picture of the closet from where I sat. The door cracked, something watching from inside. I looked up, and in the darkness, I thought I saw a face, long and hungry, watching back. Alice pulled me to my feet. "We need to go," she said, but her voice was distant, fading, drowned out by the endless hush in my ears. After I never returned, I finished my degree far away, in a school where the shadows didn't crawl along the floor at night. But every autumn, when the air turns cold and the days grow short, I call to see if the 7th floor of Riley Hall is open. Every year it is closed, except perhaps this year, because some places remember, and some rooms are always hungry. Here's something that happened not so long ago. Story 5. Can You See Me Smile 1. Old jokes and morning light. Some mornings I wake before dawn and just listen to the house breathe, creaks and sighs, settling the distant hum of the fridge. My husband Stephen is always up first, coffee in hand, humming softly as he looks out the kitchen window. He's always had a playful streak, a harmless mischief that snuck into his jokes, his laughter, even the way he looked at me across the breakfast table. His humor was one of the first things I loved about him. That, and his eyes warm, patient, always twinkling like he was about to say something silly. The sort of man who could make the darkest day feel a little lighter. He loved his dad jokes, long before he ever thought about being a dad. And I, for better or worse, always played along. 2. The joke begins. The first time he asked, it was almost nothing, so gentle I barely noticed. I padded into the kitchen, slippers brushing the linoleum, eyes blurry with sleep. Stephen looked up from the paper, one eyebrow cocked. "Can you see me smile?" His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. I blinked, half laughing. "What?" He just smiled back, lips pressed together, cheeks rising in that familiar way. Maybe he hadn't said anything. Maybe I was imagining it. But as I poured my coffee, I heard it again, softer, more distant. "Can you see me smile?" That was Stephen, always doubling down on a joke until it became funny. I rolled my eyes, kissed his cheek, and thought nothing more of it. 3. Lingering notes for days. The phrase lingered at the edges of conversation. Over the phone, in the car, while folding laundry, he'd slip it in like an afterthought. Sometimes it made me laugh. Sometimes I just ignored him. It felt harmless, even endearing in its own way. But I started noticing other things too. A dry, scratchy cough that wouldn't quite go away. A small sore under his nose, raw red, as if he'd rubbed it too much in his sleep. The scab grew, darkened, but I was too busy to worry. We all have little quirks. We all get strange habits sometimes, don't we? 4. Unsettling repetition. One evening, we sat down to dinner. Pasta, red sauce, candles flickering as rain tapped softly against the window. Stephen twisted his lips into a wide, strange grin. He stared at me, eyes too wide, and whispered, "Can you see me smile?" It was different this time. Something about the way he held his face. A tension, a pulling at the corners of his mouth. The skin near his lips looked cracked, almost brutal. I set down my fork. "Okay, enough. I'm not laughing anymore." He blinked, confusion flooding his face. "What do you mean? That can you see me smile thing? It's getting old, Stephen." He stared at me, eyes darting back and forth, as if searching for a punchline he'd forgotten. 5. Between sleep and waking that night, I tried to wash it away in a hot bath. Cucumber slices over my eyes, letting the world fade into soft green darkness. But the door creaked open behind me. "Stephen," I called. The silence answered. I shrugged it off. The wind, maybe. But later, as I toweled off, I saw something strange in the fogged mirror. A crude smiley face, drawn in the condensation. Beneath it, traced in a trembling finger, "Can you see me smile?" I stood there a moment, heart fluttering, and tried to convince myself it was a joke. 6. The midnight awakening. Sometime after midnight, a terrible dream woke me, a feeling of falling endless blackness. I gasped, eyes flying open, and saw Stephen above me, his face inches from mine, balanced on his elbows and knees. His eyes gleamed, unblinking. The scab beneath his nose had spread, leaking red across his cheek. His mouth twisted, pulled wide, as if forced by invisible hands. "Can you see me smile?" The words rattled in his throat, damp and low. I shrieked, jerking away. Stephen rolled onto his side, feigning sleep, snoring exaggeratedly. But the image lingered, the wide, bloody smile, the strange, wet sound in his voice. 7. The unraveling. The next morning he stood at the bathroom sink, tugging his lips with pale fingers, stretching his mouth wider and wider. His gums looked sickly, gray. "Stephen," I said from the doorway, my voice trembling, "please, just stop." He turned, mouth still twisted, and whispered, "Can you see me smile?" I tried to laugh it off. I tried to believe it was just a joke, but I called my mom from work, voice tight with worry. She told me to talk to him, be gentle, be honest. So that night I sat beside him as he scribbled furiously in a notepad. "Can we talk?" He didn't answer. I reached for the notebook. He snatched it back, but not before I saw the pages, filled edge to edge with the same sentence. "Can you see me smile?" Spiraling out, Stephen's smiles turned grotesque. His lips bled at the corners. He coughed, thick and ragged, leaving stains on his sleeve. He grew quiet, then wild, alternating between silence and chanting the phrase over and over. It wasn't a joke anymore. He began following me, arms outstretched, repeating the words in a guttural moan. "Can you see me smile? Can you see me smile?" I fled the house, escaping to my car as he banged on the windows, smearing bloody fingerprints on the glass. Even as I sped away, he mouthed the words through the fog. 9. A house of echoes. I stayed at my mother's, shaking sleepless. No one believed me. Police, paramedics, friends, just a man having a breakdown, they said. Just a bad rash. But I knew it was more. Something in the way he smiled, a hunger, a horror, kept me awake long into the night. The final descent. When I returned home, dread weighed on me like a heavy coat. The house was dark, silent, filled with a metallic, coppery scent. Upstairs, every wall was covered in trembling, red letters. "Can you see me smile?" Black at first, then smeared in red blood, not paint. In the bathroom, Stephen crouched naked in the corner, dragging his hand across the tiles, spelling the word "C" over and over, each letter painted with blood and thick red spit. His mouth was ruined, flesh torn away, teeth bared, muscle pulsing beneath ragged skin. He looked up, eyes wild, voice choked and wet. "Can you see me smile?" I ran. He chased me down the stairs, slamming me to the ground. I saw his jaw raw, exposed, twitching, almost animal. He pinned me, nose to nose, his breath rotting and hot. "Can you see me smile?" His tongue, swollen and purple, snaked out and pushed into my nostril. I fought, nails scraping flesh from his cheeks. He wheezed, choked, then sagged against me. 11. Escape. I slipped free, running to the kitchen, grabbing a knife. He followed, grinning through ruined lips. "Stephen, stop." But he only smiled wider. He lunged. I stabbed, the blade sinking into his throat. His body went limp, collapsing onto the tile. 12. Aftermath. When the paramedics arrived, they gagged, eyes wide in horror. The police could hardly believe my story. My mother took me home, tried to comfort me, but I couldn't close my mouth. My lips itched, my tongue felt rough as carpet. An urge, strange and sudden, made me open my mouth in a giant yawn. Mom stared, her face going pale. "What do you mean, honey?" Confused, I wiped a tear from my cheek. What do you mean? What do I mean? She leaned closer, concern in her eyes. Why wouldn't I be able to see you smile? 13. Fade out in the mirror. Late at night. Sometimes I see it, a smile not mine, stretching behind the glass. And in the quiet, when the world is still, I hear the words, whispered, over and over. Can you see me smile? As the night deepens, so does the mystery. Story 6. The narrator in the black coat. For as long as I can remember, there's been a presence just behind me, a shape that never leaves, a shadow at the edge of the world. He doesn't have a name, at least not one he's ever spoken. I've never seen his face, only the back. A dark trench coat, collar turned up high, black boots that echo faintly behind me, no matter where I go, no matter what I do. His voice is the only thing I truly know, and every morning, as I wake, he narrates my life in a tone so steady, it could almost lull me back to sleep. I used to wonder if I was losing my mind. For years I kept his presence to myself. How could I explain to anyone that there was a man following me, that no one else could see or hear, who spoke every detail of my life aloud, like a narrator in a story only I was meant to live? It became routine, a part of my mornings. I would wake up, stretch, and always hear. Natalia wakes up and rolls over in her bed. Every morning, the same phrase, a ritual, a small comfort, almost. I tuned him out most days. His words drifted over me like a half-remembered melody. Life became soft and ordinary, set to the background hum of his constant gentle voice. The change. But last week the tone changed. I was in the kitchen, the light of evening settling soft on the counters, making mashed potatoes, chopping cilantro for black bean tacos, trying to focus on the sizzle of onions, the sharp scent of fresh herbs. And then I heard it, a tremor beneath the words. Natalia is innocently chopping cilantro without any knowledge that she is in grave danger. I froze, the knife still in my hand. For the first time in years, I turned to look at him, his back to me, standing on the other side of the kitchen island, head dipped, collar high. What? I whispered. He didn't answer. He never answers. The room felt colder, somehow. I shook it off, resumed my cooking. The silence that followed was almost worse. A few moments later, I slipped, cutting my finger with the knife. A bead of blood welled up, dark and bright. I ran my finger under the faucet, heart thumping in my chest, and I heard him say, soft and certain, Natalia cut herself, and her blood oozes out, pleasing the one who watches. My skin prickled. For the first time I felt a real fear. That night, I tried to settle into the cocoon of my bed. I turned off the lamp, rolled onto my side, but his voice followed me into the dark. Natalia rolls over, closing her eyes, peacefully lying in her bed. What she doesn't know, however, is that she will soon face a horrible fate that will end in her death. The slow descent. I lay awake for hours, staring at a silhouette in the moonlit room. By morning, nothing had changed. The sun rose weak and gray through my curtains. Natalia wakes up and rolls over in bed, one day closer to her inevitable death. I tried to ignore him. I tried to act normal, brushed my teeth, washed my face, kept my eyes open as I rinsed away the soap, but his words grew stranger. Natalia washes her face, but she doesn't seem to realize that it is much easier for someone to attack when her eyes are closed. Every day after that was laced with dread. He is coming for her very soon. It is unavoidable. Natalia must die. Anxiety builds a week past. My nerves frayed, my sleep thin and restless. I began double-locking the doors, keeping a knife in my bedside table, pepper spray under my pillow. But nothing happened. Nothing but the voice, soft, relentless, counting down my days with chilling patience. Natalia's days are numbered. Natalia has been feeling anxious as she should. The one who watches is arriving shortly. The one who watches is very excited to kill Natalia. There will be no escape, only death. I avoided leaving the house, as if that would delay whatever fate he saw waiting for me. Each night, I lay awake, counting the seconds, listening for footsteps that never came. The final day? Last night, as I brushed my teeth, I watched his reflection in the mirror. The familiar shape, unmoving behind me. He spoke, low and final. Natalia brushes her teeth for the last time. Tomorrow she dies. I spat out the mouthwash, heart hammering. I tried to sleep with the lamp on, the covers pulled up tight beneath my chin. But sleep found me, heavy and restless. When I woke, it was before dawn. The house was silent, too silent. No voice greeted me, no narration. I moved from room to room, searching for the familiar shadow. He was gone. For the first time in my life, I was truly alone. Somehow, that was worse. He'd warned me, in his own way. His presence was a terrible comfort. Waiting, I sat in my kitchen all morning, knife within reach, pepper spray beside me, eyes flickering to every window, every shadow. The world seemed quieter than ever. An hour passed, then another. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A brief storm of shadow and light, then silence again. The countdown, then the doorbell rang. I crept to the front door, heart beating in my throat, and peered through the peephole. He was standing there, the man in the black coat, still with his back to me. He didn't move. He didn't speak. For a while, I could hear him mumbling, a steady, chilling chant. 2,000, 1,999, 1,998. A countdown. As he counted, the world outside my window began to disappear. A house, a car, a tree, each vanishing into darkness, as if night itself was swallowing the world whole. He kept counting, lower and lower, and outside the light faded. Though it was only 3 in the afternoon, I sit here now, hearing his voice grow quieter, softer, as the world grows dark. I don't know what will happen when he finishes counting, but I know I am alone now, with only the darkness for company. Fade out. If you hear my story, listen for footsteps behind you, a soft voice in the shadow. If you see the world growing darker, if things begin to vanish one by one, remember me, because somewhere out there, someone is always watching, and sooner or later, the countdown ends. This next tale is as mysterious as midnight. Story 7, The Woman in the House. There are things that slip between families, moving quietly, patient as time, a shadow that feeds on memory, a hunger that lives in the places we love most. If you listen, I'll tell you how it found us, and why you must never ever look too closely at what waits in the corners of your own home. Winter 1999. It was December and the world was quiet, silvered in snow. I was 12, and the house was my whole world, a place where every window glowed warm in the dark, where laughter and small arguments carried through thin winter walls, until the day my father called for me, voice tight and sharp from the bottom of the stairs. I thought it was dinner, but the moment I saw his eyes, the panic, the silent warning, I knew something was wrong. He held up his hand, a gesture that said, "Stop, watch me." His voice trembled as he spoke. "Listen to me carefully. It's very important you keep your eyes on me. You're going to notice someone else in our home, but you must ignore her, no matter what. She'll whisper, she'll follow you, she'll do anything she can to make you see her, but you must never, ever respond." I wanted to laugh, my 12-year-old mind searching for a joke, but his fear stilled my voice. "Promise me," he insisted. "I promise," I whispered. He glanced over his shoulder, face pale. "Come downstairs, quickly. Just stay focused on me. She grows stronger when we talk about her, but I couldn't let you see her by accident." Dinner, I crept down the stairs, keeping my gaze locked on my father, step after cautious step. As I reached the first floor, the air changed. Colder, denser, the scent of something sour and rotting clinging to the walls. My mother moved silently in the kitchen, her eyes swollen, her face pale from too many sleepless nights. My sister sat at the table, her head bowed, staring at the empty plate before her. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a blur, a dark, tangled mass of hair, skin stretched gray and thin, shadows clinging to her like a shroud. But I did not look. I kept my eyes on my family. Beneath the table, my sister's small, trembling hand found my knee. She whispered, "Can you see her too?" I nodded just once. "Quiet," my father hissed. The woman moved, her steps wet and slow, like something rotted inside her. She stopped behind my sister, a skeletal hand settling on her shoulder. My sister's face twisted, fighting tears. I dropped my gaze, focusing on my own plate. My mother served dinner, her hands shaking, the room thick with unspoken fear. All through the meal, the woman whispered, soft, ceaseless, a current of sound beneath our voices. Her words, like the static between radio stations, not quite words, but a pressure behind the ears. Life with her, this was how we lived. Weeks stretched into months, each day a careful dance of pretending not to hear, not to see, not to remember the life we'd had before she arrived. She followed us everywhere. If we left the house together, she'd appear in the rearview mirror, or standing by the side of the road, her face half hidden, her eyes always fixed on us. No one visited. We didn't speak to neighbors. We never stayed at friends' homes, never risked infecting another family. Sometimes, when she wandered away, we would whisper just a few words about her presence, about how to survive. My father always reminded us, never ever tell anyone. Quarantine her. She is a parasite of attention. We came to believe she only existed for those who knew her story, that she moved from one home to another, hitching a ride on the memory of her tangled in the minds of those who thought about her. The origin years later, I learned the truth. My father had known her before. When he was a boy, she'd followed his sister home from a neighbor's house, a family broken by her presence in the 70s. He kept the memory of her locked away, but in 1999, something slipped. A thought, a whisper, and suddenly, she was back, hungry for the attention of a new family. The break, it was hardest for my mother. Alone in the house while we were at school, while my father worked, she endured the whispers, the touch of cold, unseen hands. On a snowy February night, the weight became too much. After dinner, she went upstairs, the woman waiting for her, perched on the edge of the bed. I remember my mother's scream, raw and desperate, and my father's footsteps pounding up the stairs. It was the last time I saw her, just a pool of blood on white carpet, and a silence that echoed through every room. The woman stayed. My mother was gone. In the days that followed, the woman's whispers became sharper, her voice pressing at my ears. You can see her again. All you have to do is look and ask how. I never did, no matter how much I wanted to. Confession. We kept her secret. We survived barely. But this morning, for the first time in 18 years, I saw her again. Her hair, matted and dark, her skin, sickly and thin. I have a family now, a wife, children, and I cannot let her take them from me. That is why I'm telling you why you're hearing this now. Because there is only one way to make her leave, one way to pass on the infection. You must think about her. Picture her in your mind. See her in the corners, behind you in the mirror, on the stairs at night. Because if you think of her, if you imagine her in your home, she will leave mine. I am so sorry. Fade out. If you notice a woman, hair dark and tangled, skin gray as ash. If you hear her whispers, feel her touch on your shoulder, see her in your home, you must ignore her. Do not look at her. Do not speak to her. Do not let her in. It's for your own good, and it's the only way my family can finally be free. This next story comes from a shadowed place. Story 8. Maggie watches the hall. Hospitals are places of bright lights and constant motion. Even at night, The ER glows. Machines beeping. Nurses whispering. Lives quietly rearranging themselves. But sometimes, in the hum of fluorescent lights and the hush of empty corridors, you see something you can't explain. Something that won't let you rest. Let me tell you what happened last night, and why I keep glancing at the hallway, wondering who might be standing just out of sight. Night shift. It was just another long night. The end of December. The world outside dark and quiet. Inside filled with the usual sounds of an overnight ER shift. I sat at the nurse's station, nursing a cup of cold coffee, half reading trashy magazines, half listening to the buzz of machines. Olga, my partner for the shift, giggled and nudged me. The little girl escaped, she said. I followed her finger to the security monitor, grainy black and white, and sure enough, there she was, a tiny figure in the hallway, standing alone beneath the humming lights. Madeline, 6 years old, admitted earlier that evening after a fall down the stairs, a smear of blood on her forehead, her hair tangled and wild. She shouldn't be up, I muttered, leaning closer to the screen. And what is she wearing? No longer the soft hospital gown. A black dress, crisp white stockings, shiny shoes, like something out of an old photograph. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to follow her, a nervous energy, a flicker in her step. Well, Olga drawled, eyes never leaving her phone. Are you going to get her, or should I? I sighed, pushed back my chair, and hurried down the empty hall. First encounter Madeline. My voice echoed, soft and small in the vastness of night. I rounded the corner and found only the cool, empty air. No little girl, no black dress. I checked her room. There she was, deep asleep, her IV untouched, her breath even and slow. I closed the door quietly behind me, the sense of unease rising like a chill up my spine. When I returned, Olga barely looked up. You find her? Yet asleep in her bed. I hesitated, lowering my voice. This is going to sound strange, but I don't think she ever got out of bed. Olga only laughed, her face lit blue by the glow of her phone. She teased me, as usual, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. Second encounter. The hours crawled by. Machines beeped, doors opened and closed, and the cold crept deeper into the bones of the building. At 3:40 a.m., I glanced at the monitor again. Madeline there, outside her door in that strange old-fashioned dress. But this time she looked afraid, her body tense, her arms outstretched behind her, as if trying to block something from reaching the room. Look, Madeline's up again, I said, nudging Olga. At that moment, a light at the far end of the hallway flickered and died. The feed grew darker, more distorted. Olga glanced up, forcing a joke, but even her voice sounded uncertain. Go check on her if you're so brave, I challenged. She hesitated, then slowly made her way down the hall. On the monitor, the lights blinked out one by one, until only the circle of brightness above Madeline's door remained. I watched, unable to look away. Then a shadow emerged, tall, impossibly thin, stretching from floor to ceiling. At first, I thought it was Olga, but it was far too tall, the edges shifting like smoke. The darkness crept closer, slow and deliberate, until it hovered beside Madeline. She backed away, her face terrified, trying to keep the thing from entering the room. The shadow. I blinked. Maybe the camera was glitching. Maybe it was a trick of the light. But Madeline was afraid. She shook her head violently, her arms still shielding the doorway. The shadow inched forward, closer, filling the small space with something cold and ancient. Suddenly, beep, 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 the nurse's console blared, Madeline's vitals plummeting. I ran, my shoes silent on the linoleum, the hallway half dark. Olga frozen by the door. Call the doctor, I shouted, rushing past her into the room. Madeline lay motionless, her small chest still. I began CPR, my hands shaking, pleading in silence. Come back, come back. Finally, a heart, a flutter of breath. She was back. The recovery. The days after felt like waking from a nightmare. Madeline recovered quickly, her cheeks rosy, her laughter returning. As I took her blood pressure before she left, I found myself smiling at her bravery. How are you feeling? I asked gently. Great, she beamed, turning to her parents. She saved me, I smiled, a little embarrassed. Ah, it was nothing. She shook her head. Not you, Maggie. I blinked. Who's Maggie? But Madeline only smiled, swinging her feet. Her parents looked uneasy. Her father coughed, staring at the floor. Later, as I finished the paperwork, curiosity gnawed at me. Who's Maggie? I asked her father as he lingered behind. He sighed. When my wife was pregnant, there were twins, but only one made it. We told Madeline. Maybe we shouldn't have. She always talks about Maggie, says she's still with us. His eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. As he left, I remembered the shadow, the way Madeline blocked the doorway, her arms open wide. And I remembered the second small figure I thought I'd seen, for just a moment in the corner of the screen, standing beside her, hand in hand, a twin, guarding the door. Fade-out hospitals are full of bright lights, but sometimes it's the shadows that matter most. Sometimes someone is watching, standing guard in the darkness, keeping us safe in ways we cannot see. And sometimes when the night is quiet and you glance at the hallway cameras, you just might catch a glimpse of someone who isn't there. Close your eyes as I share the next secret. Story 9. The Wedding with the Smiling Bride. I've spent a decade behind the camera, quietly observing the ceremonies and rituals that bind people together, weddings with all their laughter and nervous tears. I've seen love in every shade, awkward, overjoyed, desperate, and sometimes quietly haunted. But last October, on a chilly evening in a house shrouded by old trees and richer secrets, I witnessed a wedding that never should have happened. Some nights I still dream of it, the silent bride, the hungry shadows, and the way a smile can change everything. Arrival. It began the way these stories always do. A rushed call, desperate parents, a family with too much money and too many secrets. They needed a photographer. Last minute. Their original one, I was told, had... I should have wondered why. The house was enormous, wreathed in autumn leaves, every window glowing gold in the dusk. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and anxiety. I met the bride, Tanya, as she was being prepared, her mother and aunts fluttering, fussing with makeup and hair. Tanya looked impossibly young, all pale cheeks and glassy blue eyes. Not a word from her lips, not a single smile. Her stepfather, Harold, watched everything with a wolfish, patient grin. The groom, Marcel, was a tall shadow at the edge of every room, his hands cold, his eyes unblinking, always just out of the good light. The bride in a quiet moment. As the fuss moved to the hall, I found Tanya by the window, turning an unlit cigarette between her fingers. She stared out at the garden, lost somewhere far away. I sat beside her, quietly offering a light, not for the cigarette, but for conversation. She said she didn't smoke. It was just something to hold, something that helped. She told me her story in quiet fragments. 19 years old, pushed toward marriage by a stepfather who controlled everything, her money, her freedom, her future. I don't want this, she whispered, her eyes huge, hopeful, but afraid. If I say no, I lose everything. I pressed a business card into her hand with a number, a promise of help. She tucked it away, her fingers trembling. The ceremony. The guests gathered, their laughter forced and brittle. Tanya walked down the aisle, eyes wide, her steps stiff as if she was heading somewhere colder. Marcel waited, tall and still. He took her hand, and I watched her flinch. The priest's words fell heavily in the air. When the kiss came, Tanya's lips barely moved. Just one tear slipped down her cheek. The reception that followed was a blur of lights and music. Tanya never smiled, Not once, except for a brief, odd moment during the first dance, when Marcel leaned down, whispered something in her ear, and she looked up at him in surprise. For the first time, she smiled, bright and sudden as spring. She even laughed, just once. The discovery. But beneath all the clinking glasses and polite applause, something dark was unspooling. Carol, the bride's mother, hounded me for pictures, her painted smile never reaching her tired eyes. Trying to escape her, I slipped away looking for Harold, the stepfather, hoping to catch a quiet shot of him at the bar. Instead, I heard a strange sound from the men's room, a deep, wet swallowing, a sound that raised the hairs on my neck. I opened the door, camera ready. Inside, the room was painted with blood, and Harold's head, eyes frozen in horror, sat in the sink. His body was scattered in pieces across the tiled floor. Standing over him was Marcel, no longer just tall and gaunt, but impossibly changed, his mouth stretched wide, swallowing Harold's arm in slow, patient gulps. His eyes turned on me, pupils split like a serpent's, gleaming and cold. The truth, for a moment I thought I'd faint, but Marcel only regarded me with strange courtesy, wiped his mouth and pressed a handful of cold diamonds into my palm. "A replacement for your camera," he said, "and for your silence," he explained softly, almost kindly. Tanya was never in danger from him. He delayed the wedding as long as he could, hoping she'd find a way out. Harold was the one who'd sold his stepdaughter, and in the end, Marcel had simply taken his payment. "I'm not sure what I am," he admitted, his body shifting for a moment, impossibly, not quite man, not quite snake, a ripple of scales beneath his skin. The deal before I left, I asked if I could send Carol, the mother, to the restroom. Marcel just smiled and disappeared quietly into the shadows as she approached. I heard a short scream, then silence. Back at the reception, Marcel reappeared, his tuxedo immaculate, Tanya at his side, radiant and new. No one ever saw Carol or Harold again. Epilogue. It's been a year now. Tanya found her way to freedom, university, new friends, a life that was finally her own. She volunteers at a shelter now, her smile easy and true. Every Friday night, she and Marcel dance at the local arcade, surrounded by friends, his oddities faded into the background, just another part of their peculiar happiness. The last photo she sent me was of them together, her hand on her belly, a new life on the way. Sometimes I wonder if Marcel is still what he was that night, or if love in the end changes even the strangest monsters. All I know is that some weddings are about escape, and some are about survival, and sometimes behind the lens, you see things that change you, long after the music has faded. Here's a story that might linger in your thoughts. Story 10. The Boy in the Raincoat. There are things that happen in childhood you never quite let go of. Sometimes the story starts quietly, with a knock at the door, a shadow in the hallway, and a raincoat dripping on the mat. My story began when I was 10. One day I was an only child. The next, I had an older brother. Part 1. The Arrival. It's strange to remember now how quickly a family can change. There were no warnings, no explanation, just my parents, suddenly treating the arrival of a stranger as something normal. He came to our house on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy with rain, his figure framed in the open doorway. A tall boy, silent, water streaming from the waxed surface of his coat. He offered his hand. I didn't take it. I hid behind my mother's legs, peeking out as he smiled, a sad, knowing sort of smile. She apologized for me, and I was sent to the basement to sleep from then on. My brother got my room. He got everything, really, my parents' attention, their pride, the warm places at the dinner table. I tried not to resent him, but loneliness grows fast in the dark. Part 2. The basement. I spent my days in the basement, alone except for the hum of the furnace and my therapist's voice in my head. I never talked much, Everyone seemed disappointed by that, but I felt safest when the world was quiet. One day my brother came downstairs. He didn't speak, just set down an old painting set, some canvases, and an easel. He started to paint. I watched from behind the sofa, awed by how quickly color bloomed beneath his brush. He painted a door, familiar somehow, but I couldn't place it. When he finished, he left the painting and went back upstairs. I stared at that door for weeks. Eventually, I picked up the brush. Part 3. Learning at first, my hands shook. My paintings were clumsy, unsteady, nothing like his. But time in the basement is patient, and paint is a slow friend. Every so often, he'd come down looking at my work with that same quiet, mournful expression. Sometimes I saw him cry. I never dared to approach him. Not until the day I finally heard him speak. "Keep it up," he whispered. For the first time in my life, something warm unfurled inside me. I painted more. Part 4. Goodbye. By 16, I was almost as good as he was, but he was around less and less. When he finally came home, I gathered my courage. "Look what I painted," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. My parents looked at me as if seeing a ghost. I led my brother to the basement, where my latest painting stood beneath a bare bowl. He stepped into the light, tears streaming silently down his face. "It's beautiful," he said. His voice cracked, and he began to cry harder. I tried to comfort him, hugging him for the first time. His body swayed, then he fell. His head struck the desk, and just like that, he was gone. Part 5. The hospital. The world shifted. Whispers in the house. Strange looks from my parents. Police. Doctors. They said I'd killed him. I hadn't, I swear it. But in the end, I was sent away. The hospital was white and cold, but they gave me paints. My parents visited once a week, their eyes distant. I thought about my brother constantly, especially the painting of the door. Part 6. The door. I tried over and over to paint it from memory. Each time, something was wrong. But one afternoon, I got it right. Suddenly, it was there. The front door of our house, every detail, every shadow, exactly as I remembered. I stood back, shivering. The room seemed to grow colder, but I didn't care. I stared at the painting for hours. I ached to be outside it, to just go home, to be welcomed back, to start over. On a whim, I closed my eyes, imagined the cold wind, the weight of rain on my skin. I reached out, and I felt it, rain against my face, the smell of wet earth. I opened my eyes. I was standing on the porch of my parents' house. Part 7. Coming home. I hesitated only a moment before knocking. My mother answered, her face weary. "Can I help you?" she asked, uncertain. I swallowed. "Mum, it's your son." She tried to close the door. I blocked it with my foot. "Please, just listen." She looked into my eyes, searching for something. Recognition, fear, hope. After a moment, she let me inside. In the living room, a little boy stared at me, wide-eyed, then darted behind her legs just as I had, so many years ago. I smiled, feeling the weight of the painting set in my pocket. I knew what I needed to do. Fade out. Some families are made of blood, some of secrets and longing, and some of brushes dipped in color, each stroke opening a door to some place new. I still dream of rain on the window, of the soft thud of footsteps in the hall, and a brother's hand reaching out to show me how to open the world. Next, listen to what someone else experienced. Story 11. The living room set. Some houses have stories woven into the furniture, so quietly you hardly notice the shape of your own life changing until it's too late, until the only warmth you feel is the steady, soft thump of a heart somewhere deep inside the cushions. This is the story of my family and the living room where I grew up. Part 1. He always loved that corner. My father was an ordinary man. Kevin the accountant, age 51, a quiet laugh, a soft belly, never late for dinner. He used to come home, drop his bag by the door, and settle into his favorite spot in the living room. Not on the expensive new couch. He'd always sit cross-legged on the floor, tucked away in the sunbeam from the west window. We teased him for it. He'd just smile and say, "It feels right here." But one day, he didn't get up. Part 2, Something Isn't Right. At first it was a joke, Dad pretending to be part of the furniture, a new game in the house. But by the third day the laughter faded. He stopped eating, he stopped drinking, he barely spoke, just smiled, serene and distant, saying only, "No, this feels right." Mom called the doctor. Nobody knew what to do. No fever, no pain, no hunger, no thirst. He just sat. Hours became days. The world outside grew quieter, too. We all stayed inside, waiting for someone to fix what was happening. But nothing changed. Part 3, The Changes. It began with his hands and feet, drying and flaking away like old paint. No blood, no mess, just skin crumbling to dust, leaving behind smooth, dark stumps. The rest of him soon followed. Limbs twisted, joints fused, his back arched, shoulders dropping lower, until his body was no longer a man's, but a thing shaped for sitting. His neck retracted, jaw bending wide, eyes sliding down to his chest. Even his voice faded away. His last words, soft as a sigh. "Don't cry, I am chair. Always was chair. Happy as chair." And then he was gone. Not gone, just different. A bright orange chair, warm and softly thumping beneath the fabric. Part 4, Moma's Turn. Mom didn't want anyone to know. No photos, no desperate pleas on the internet. We closed the curtains, sat together in the dim room, listening to Dad's quiet heart somewhere beneath the orange velvet. But soon, she began to change too. Her body stretched, her back widening, limbs flattening into plush cushions. She wept long after her eyes became flat plastic buttons. In time, she became a couch, pinstripe velvet, broad and comforting, always warm, always sighing in her sleep. Part 5, My Place. I tried to fight it. I was only 17. I wanted college, love, a future outside these four walls. But as I cared for them, scrubbing the last of Mom's skin, listening to the mail pile up, the truth grew louder in my bones. I was never meant to leave. This spot on the rug between the chair and the couch was always waiting for me. I screamed, I cried, but the feeling never left. That heavy certainty pulling me inward, telling me to rest. Part 6, The Set. Now I understand. Dad was the chair. Mom is the couch, and I am the coffee table. I always was. Soon my limbs will fold in on themselves, fingers and toes growing numb, back flattening out, skin turning smooth and wooden. I want to say I'm sorry to anyone who finds us here waiting quietly in the empty house together in the dark. Please don't separate us. We're a set. Sometimes when the rain is soft against the window, I hear Dad's steady heart in the cushions. I feel Mom's gentle warmth beside me. And I know I was never alone. Some stories are carved in wood, stitched into fabric, woven into the quiet rooms we leave behind. We are home. We are together. We are furniture. As the night deepens, so does the mystery. Story 12, The Rules for Surviving This Flight. There's a strange stillness to early morning flights, the hush before the world wakes up, the quiet hum of jet engines rising through a clouded sky. But sometimes, if you listen closely, there are other sounds too, stranger rules in the air, and faces that don't quite belong. This is the story of the strangest flight I ever took, and the rules I was given for surviving it. Part 1, The List. It started before I even boarded. As I handed my ticket to the attendant, her smile too wide, eyes a little too bright, she slipped a folded sheet into my hand, tucked neatly behind my boarding pass. Her voice was cheerful, almost too eager. "Have a nice flight," she said, her gaze lingering on me for a fraction too long. I found my seat, the thin blue light of the cabin making everything look washed out and surreal. I unfolded the paper with nervous curiosity, expecting some airline coupon or welcome aboard note. Instead, it was a handwritten list. The pen strokes were hurried, uneven, almost frantic. It read, "Rules for surviving this flight. Do not speak of this sheet to any passenger. You are the only human on this flight. Check the time on your phone. After reading this sheet, all rules will apply based on the time of your phone. During the first hour of the flight, do not talk to anyone. People may try to talk to you, but ignore them completely. During the second hour, you may talk again, but if anyone mentions the window, do not look outside under any circumstances. If you hear a child crying in the cabin, immediately run to the bathroom. If the screen of your entertainment console suddenly goes black, immediately look away and do not stare at it. During the third hour, the captain will make an announcement. Follow the instructions. During the fourth hour, do not sit in your seat. If you make it past the fourth hour, you will need to spend the rest of the flight evading the chaser. You will know the chaser when you see them. When the captain announces the plane is landing, push your way to the exit door and open it. You will find that the outside is a black void. Jump into it without hesitation." I read and reread the rules, half smiling, half nervous. Surely a prank, maybe a viral marketing stunt. But I checked the time, just to humor the list. 7:13 a.m., first hour, and that's when the cabin's gentle hum changed, just slightly, like the sound of the world holding its breath. Part 2. The passengers, a young man sat down next to me. Laptop bag, quiet eyes, no greeting, just the clink of his seatbelt and the faint scent of something cold. He didn't look at me, didn't speak, just stared straight ahead like he was waiting for the world to start. The plane's engines rumbled to life. We taxied down the runway, the city shrinking behind us, clouds gathering at the windows. As the wheels left the ground, a hush settled over the cabin. That was when the man beside me turned and placed his hand on my shoulder. His touch was ice-cold, heavy, not the warmth of human skin, but something dense and wrong. I looked at him, heart pounding, and saw what I can only describe as a face trying to remember how to be human. Eyes too wide, nose off-center, lips that were thin and stretched in a way that made me want to look away. And then he spoke, voice calm, so ordinary that for a moment the unease almost faded. "Hey, do you wear headphones?" A strange question, but before I could answer, he leaned in closer. "How would you feel if I cut your hand off right now?" He said it so casually, like asking about the weather. A chill ran down my spine. That was the moment I remembered the first rule. Don't talk to anyone during the first hour. I stared straight ahead, squeezing the paper in my fist, forcing myself to ignore him. The man sat back, turned on his laptop, and began to type. Part 3. The wrong details. I glanced at his screen, and what I saw made my stomach twist. A full-screen photograph of me. Not smiling, not candid, just a dead-on shot of my face, eyes wide in fear. His keyboard wasn't normal. The keys covered in strange symbols, letters I'd never seen before, shapes that shifted when I tried to focus on them. He kept staring at the photo, his long fingers moving quickly over the strange keyboard. Then the flight attendant appeared, her smile brittle, her eyes too bright. "Sir, is this man bothering you?" she asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, everyone in the cabin turned to look at me. Dozens of faces, all with those long, thin smiles, eyes too big and glossy, red tears rolling down their cheeks. Part 4. The rules become real. Panic prickled up my spine. I tried to remember the list, the second rule, the third. What hour was it now? The passengers began to whisper. Soft, humming voices in unison, like the murmur of a crowd at a funeral. The man beside me stared at me, mouth stretching wider. He didn't blink, I shut my eyes, counting my breaths, pretending I was somewhere else, anywhere else but here. A child's cry echoed through the cabin. My hand shot to the bathroom door. Heart hammering, the rule, always follow the rules. I ran, feet pounding on the thin carpet, ignoring the grasping hands that reached for me, the voices that grew louder, the words they chanted. Jump, jump, jump. Part 5. The rest of the flight hours passed, measured only by the dull ache in my muscles and the shifting rules that governed each moment. I didn't sit in my seat during the 4th hour. I kept moving, dodging glances from faces that didn't seem to need to blink. When the captain's voice finally echoed over the intercom, the words weren't quite right. They shimmered in the air, each syllable buzzing in my ears. Prepare for landing. The voice not quite human. I remembered the last rule. When you hear the announcement, push your way to the exit and open it. You will find the outside is a black void. Jump into it without hesitation. The world seemed to slow as I reached the door. The other passengers watched me, all grinning, all weeping red tears. I pulled the handle. The door opened, and beyond it, nothing but a soft, endless darkness. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and jumped. Epilogue. I don't remember landing. I don't remember falling. Only the feeling of weightlessness, of silence, and the sense that I was finally awake. I woke up in my own bed, the flight only a memory, the rules still clenched in my hand. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the whisper of engines, feel the brush of cold air at my side. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really landed at all, but I never look out the window, not anymore. Now, hear what happened in another sleepless hour. Story 13. The janitor in the Harvard wormhole. There's a quiet that comes over buildings, late at night, long after the last class ends and the final echoes fade from the halls. I've spent most of my life walking those empty corridors, mop in hand, sweeping up what's left behind after genius and madness have called it a day. Some secrets get locked behind lab doors and never make it out. But sometimes, if you're the one with the keys, the secrets find their way to you. This is the story of what happened the night I stumbled into a Harvard experiment, and why, even after $1 million bribe and 15 years of silence, I'm more afraid now than ever before. Part 1. Night Rounds. I'd always been a night janitor, officially an assistant supervisor of maintenance, but really just the guy who cleaned up after everyone else. That night, I was working my favorite shift, the Astrophysics Center, a building that always felt a little haunted, even before any of this happened. I was mopping the 2nd floor hallway, breathing in the scent of old chalk, when the door to room 204 creaked open. A man poked his head out, gray hair, big glasses, that unmissable professor look. "Hey you," he said. I stopped, mop still dripping. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" He smiled, a little too wide. "How'd you like to make $1,000? 1 hour, easy money." Now, I was used to strange requests, but this was new, even for me. Still, $1,000 sounded pretty good, and I figured, what's the harm in helping out for a bit? I left my mop against the wall and followed him in. Part 2. The experiment room 204 was different. You could feel it in your skin, a prickling electric charge, like the air just before a thunderstorm. In the center, a table held a glass globe, crackling with black lightning. 4 students sat along the wall, strapped into chairs, metal domes pressed over their heads, eyes closed. I tried to steady my nerves. Is everyone okay?" The professor just smiled. "They're fine. We're about to make history. We're going to open the first wormhole." He pointed at a lever beside a massive humming machine. "My job is to go through. Your job is to pull the lever and shut it all down after 30 minutes. Unless I'm back." I stared at the students, silent, pale, unmoving. Everything in me screamed to get out, but I stayed. A check in my hand, a job to do, The professor poured neon blue liquid onto the globe. Lightning flared. The globe shattered, and the air filled with a roaring wind. A black hole yawning wide in the center of the room. He turned, smiling, and stepped inside. Part 3. Waiting 30 minutes. I watched the seconds crawl by on my watch. 15 minutes left. The students' faces were white. Their eyes rolled back, jaws grinding like old machines. One began to bleed from his nose. Another trembled in his seat. Was it real? Was this some elaborate trick? Some Ivy League prank to see if I'd panic? I paced, torn between the lever and the students. The folder on the table held consent forms, each one signed, each one admitting the chance of imminent death. Not exactly reassuring. 5 minutes left. Another nosebleed. Another tremor. My hand shook on the lever. 30 seconds. My heart hammered. Was I about to trap a man forever, or save lives? 5 seconds. 3. Suddenly, the professor's head burst through the swirling blackness. "Wait," he shouted, his face stretched in terror, his body half in, half out of that other world. I hesitated, and he finally tumbled through. "Do it," he screamed. At the same instant, a wet popping sound cracked through the room. The wormhole snapped shut, and one of the students' heads, the one named Jackson, simply exploded. Part 4. What came through the silence afterward felt heavy, sticky, as if the air itself had thickened. The professor was breathing hard, his glasses crooked, his smile slowly crawling back onto his face. I tried to free the students, but when the first girl saw him, she screamed, eyes wild with fear. The second kid, eyes wide. "Get us out of here," he begged. The third kid just whispered, "That's not the professor." I turned to look, and what I saw will haunt me forever. The professor's mouth twisted, jaws working at impossible angles, skin crawling with something beneath. Black bones erupted from his chest, dripping with green slime, as he stalked toward the students. The third kid's calm never wavered. "It comes from a terrible place," she said, "a place where there is nothing but pain." I barely managed to free her, chairs thrown, screams filling the room. The professor, no, the thing that wore his skin tearing into the others. I grabbed her hand, knife in the other, and we ran. I stabbed it, felt the knife sink deep, but it kept coming. A nightmare dragged out of another world. In the chaos, I made it to the door, felt her arm slipping from my grasp. I never looked back. Part 5. The cover-up. Somehow I made it outside, locking the doors behind me, shouting into my radio for campus security. Within minutes, black SUVs pulled up, men in suits and body armor pouring inside. Gunfire, screams, then silence. A man found me, face forgotten, voice soft. "We'll give you $1 million, he said, "and a promotion. Just sign this NDA. Never speak of this again." I did. The money went to my son, and I went back to my rounds, because someone had to clean up the messes. They promised to burn everything, to destroy the notes, to make sure it never happened again. I made sure I watched the flames myself. Part 6. 15 years later. For years I kept my mouth shut. The nightmares faded, almost until last night when I saw him again. The professor, not a day older, his smile just as wide. "Hey there, Chief," he said, and I ran because I know what's behind that smile, and I know what happens when the door between worlds opens, even just a crack. Epilogue. There are things that should stay locked away, secrets better left to gather dust and darkness. But sometimes when you're the one with the keys, the secrets come looking for you. And if you ever find yourself in a building late at night, where the air feels electric, where the shadows are a little too deep, and you hear a voice say, "Hey there, Chief," don't answer, just run. Let's turn the page to another whispered horror. Story 14. She's a keeper. They used to say I was a keeper. My father's voice echoes in my memories, soft and proud, his big hand tussling my hair in the fluorescent glow of the supermarket. His chuckle gentle as he'd say it to any stranger. She's a keeper. I wonder what he'd say if he could see me now. The secrets in my heart, the things I've done and had done to me, the smile I still wear even when everything inside me feels cold. People always told me I was good, sweet, polite. I learned early how to be the girl everyone wanted, and later how easy it was for people to take from girls who want to please. Part 1. Daddy's little girl. Growing up, I lived for praise. A gold star at school, a pat on the head from a neighbor, even a smile from a grumpy cashier would make my week. I learned to love the feeling, the glow of being seen, being wanted, being good. But there's a cost to being a keeper. Somewhere along the line, when the world stopped giving me gold stars, I started needing them more. Compliments at work, nods from friends, likes on photos, approval from men. Even now, as I sit at my tidy desk in the downtown office, fingers flying across the keyboard, I still crave it. Just one little sign that I matter. Part 2. The boss. That's how Jonathan Price found me. He was perfect on the outside. Clean-cut, expensive watch. A voice that could charm birds out of trees. He'd compliment my blouse, tell me how efficient I was, call me his right hand. At first I'd blush and remind myself of the ring on his finger, the pictures of his wife and kids on his desk. He was married, of course, but he was so kind, so attentive, so generous with his approval. It started with late nights at work, little chats in the empty office, drinks at the bar when everyone else had gone home. I knew I shouldn't, but Jonathan's words made me feel like a person again, a keeper. The first time he kissed me, it felt like all my doubts vanished. The first time he stayed the night, it felt like I finally belonged. Part 3. Belonging affairs aren't what you think. They aren't just passion and drama. Sometimes they're quiet, desperate things. The slow, gnawing need to be needed. I was careful. Jonathan was careful. But I saw the looks in the office, the whispered, the way other women avoided my eyes, the way the men smirked. He'd promise it would all change soon. He just needed to sort things out with his wife, make sure the kids weren't hurt. He needed time. He always needed time. I believed him. I had to, because otherwise, what did that make me? Part 4. The truth. I should have seen it sooner. Jonathan posted a picture with his wife, Mariana, her pregnant belly held in his arms, his smile broad and easy, his caption full of hope for the next 15 years. I read it at my desk, my hand trembling. He wasn't leaving her. He was never going to leave her. I drank that night alone in my tiny apartment, the city lights blurred by tears and cheap red wine. The realization hit like a wave. I was a placeholder, an easy secret, a shadow. I called him, told him we needed to talk. He came. Hours later, my cheeks flushed and my voice raw. I gave him an ultimatum. Pick me or her, Jonathan, or I'll call your wife and tell her everything. I thought I sounded strong. I thought I was finally being the kind of woman people don't walk all over. Part 5. Ending. Jonathan's face went pale, then red, his hands shaking as he muttered, "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let things be?" I barely remember the moment he snapped, the glint of the wine bottle in his hand, the weight of the blow as glass shattered against my skull, the sound wet, heavy, final. He stabbed me with what was left, again and again, until my vision went black. I remember the pain, the heat in my neck, the taste of blood, the coldness settling over me. I remember dying. Part 6. Coming back. But I didn't stay dead. I woke up in the dark, body cold and broken, skin tight and itchy, as rot crept beneath my clothes. It's strange what your mind does to you when you realize you're not supposed to be here anymore. I wandered through my empty apartment, blood pooled on the carpet, my reflection in the window still smiling, even as my throat slumped and sagged. I felt it then, that itch under the skin, the urge to peel and scratch, to tear the rotten flesh away. I spent the night cleaning myself up, scraping away decay, bundling up in scarves and gloves, pretending to be normal. I went to work the next morning. Part 7. The office. Jonathan arrived late. He stopped in the doorway, face ashen, eyes wild, seeing me at my desk, typing away like nothing had happened. I just smiled and waved. He locked himself in his office. I knew then he remembered what he had done. The whole office was sick that week, people complaining of a cold. I left early, told them I needed rest, but I wasn't going home. Part 8. Mariana. Jonathan's house was beautiful, the kind of place people dream about. White porch, roses in bloom, a life built on lies. Mariana was in the garden, hands dirty, hair pulled back with a yellow bandana. She smiled when she saw me, eyes gentle. "Nicole, are you all right? You sound different." "I just need to talk," I said. She let me in, her movements slow with pregnancy. We sat in the quiet kitchen, sunlight slanting across the table. "I've been having an affair with your husband," I said. She sighed, shoulders sagging. "I figured," she replied softly. "He's always working late. I was going to hire a private investigator." I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. She looked at me, pity and sadness mixing on her face. "Are you still seeing him?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. It ended the night he tried to kill me." Her eyebrows knit in confusion. I pulled off my scarf, showed her my neck, the bruised, rotting flesh, the wounds that wouldn't heal. Her face went pale. She ran for the bathroom, retched until she was empty. Part 9. The secret. When she returned, her face was still white, but something in her eyes had changed. "Show me again," she whispered. I did. She stared, awe overtaking disgust. "I used to be a surgeon," she murmured, before Jonathan insisted I stay home. You shouldn't be alive." "I'm not a ghost," I told her. "This just happens sometimes. My daddy said it ran in the family." She wept then, tears running down her cheeks. I never imagined." I took her hand. "I need your help," I said. "It'll take weeks for me to heal on my own, but there's a way to make it faster. My daddy's sister, my aunt, she learned the trick. Help me, and I'll disappear from your life." She agreed, almost grateful for something to do besides wait for Jonathan's lies to catch up to her. Part 10. Waiting. The kids are gone tonight, sleeping over at Grandma's. There's a wine glass laced with sleeping pills ready for Jonathan, and I'm waiting in the basement, peeling away another layer of dead skin, wondering what flesh tastes like. Mariana brings me towels, a gentle smile hiding the storm in her heart. She says I'm a miracle. She wants to study me, to understand what keeps me alive when I shouldn't be. I watch her sometimes, the kindness in her hands, the quiet fury in her eyes. She says I'm a keeper. I think maybe for the first time I believe her. Epilogue. People say I'm a keeper, but they never ask what I'm keeping. A secret, a body that won't die, a grudge, cold and silent. If you ever find yourself craving approval, yearning for a pat on the back, be careful who you let call you a keeper. Sometimes, what you're keeping is the very thing that refuses to let you rest, and sometimes being kept is just another way of being trapped. Let's settle in for another tale of dread. Story 15. If the time stops at 1:09 a.m., roll over and pray. You know how there's a certain hour in the night when the world goes quiet, a stillness so thick it feels like the house itself is its breath. Sometimes I lie awake and listen, counting the creaks and distant hums, trying to convince myself there's nothing to be afraid of. But lately, the dark has felt different, heavier, somehow, and I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me, not from outside, but from within the walls I call home. If you ever find yourself awake at 1:09 a.m., I hope you'll remember this story, and I hope you'll do what I didn't do soon enough. Roll over, close your eyes, and pray they think you're asleep. Part 1. The first night. I wish I could say I was a brave man, but the truth is, bravery is easy to talk about in the daylight. That first night, I didn't sense anything wrong. We'd spent the day chopping firewood for the winter. Kelsey, my wife, and our twin boys, Eric and Aaron. By 9 o'clock, we were all out cold. I woke up later to a silence so dense it pressed against my ears like a blanket. No wind, no pipes groaning, not even the soft wheeze of Kelsey's breathing. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, its glow cutting through the dark. 1:09 a.m. I rolled over, expecting to see Kelsey curled up beside me. The bed was empty. My heart thudded, slow and uncertain. A dim hall light glowed just beyond the bedroom door. I could see 3 shadows on the wall, thin and elongated, barely moving except for the tiniest twitch at the sound of my voice. "Kelsey?" I whispered, half expecting her to answer with a sleepy laugh. The shadows jerked at the sound, not startled but alert, as if something inside them had just woken up. A chill threaded down my spine. The air felt wrong, heavier, colder, expectant. I stepped out of bed, my bare feet numb against the floorboards, and crept to the doorway. What I saw made me freeze. Kelsey and the boys, standing in the hall with their backs to me, their bodies stiff as mannequins, but their heads twisted, all 3 faces stretched into wide, unnatural smiles, eyes fixed directly on me. Part 2. The smile. The smiles were too big, painfully so, as if their faces had forgotten how to move any other way. "What are you guys doing?" I tried to laugh, but it came out thin and flat. Another twitch, a jerky puppet-like movement. A microwave beep shattered the silence, sharp and too loud. Suddenly, as if released from a spell, the boys turned and shuffled back to their room. Kelsey followed, her grin melting away as she passed me, her steps heavy and mechanical. She slid into bed, curling up without a word, her breathing deep and even, like she'd been there all along. I checked the time again, 1:10 a.m. It felt like an eternity had passed, but only a minute had slipped by. I lay back down, staring into the dark, wondering if I was dreaming, or if I'd just witnessed something I shouldn't have. Part 3. Denial. The next morning, sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, the world felt normal again. Bacon sizzled, the boys laughed, and Kelsey was humming as she washed dishes. I tried to joke about their prank the night before, but they only stared at me, confused and unsettled. They denied everything, their voices sharp with unease. "Ryan, don't joke like that," Kelsey said, her hand trembling as she set a plate on the table. Was it a dream? Sleepwalking? I told myself it didn't matter, but I couldn't shake the way their smiles had lingered in the dark. That day, I made a plan. Tonight, I'd keep my phone by the bed, ready to catch them in the act. Part 4. The second night. That night, as the house slipped into stillness, I lay awake, the blue light of my phone pulsing like a beacon. When I woke again, the silence was back, thicker than before, as if the world had stopped spinning. 1:09. I tried to record, but my phone was frozen, the screen unresponsive. Trapped in time, shadows crept closer, Kelsey and the boys standing just outside the door, their eyes wide and wild, smiles stretching even farther, teeth too white in the dim light. When I covered my mouth in terror, they stepped closer, not walking, but gliding, feet barely brushing the floor. Kelsey's eyes found mine, her smile splitting her face. She was right in front of me, close enough for me to see the veins bulging in her eyes, the strange hunger there. I stumbled back, diving beneath the covers like a child. I felt them hit me heavy, unrelenting blows, harder than any of them should be able to manage. I lay perfectly still, biting my tongue to keep from crying out. Gradually, the blows faded. A thick, raspy breathing hovered above me. Not quite human, not quite animal. Then silence. A voice, quick and hissing, "I know you're not asleep." The microwave beep. The house whirred back to life. Footsteps retreated. The bed dipped as Kelsey crawled in beside me, her breathing gentle and soft once again. Part 5. A Rule is Born. I barely slept the rest of the night, turning over what I'd seen, what I'd felt. The only thing that had kept them at bay was my stillness, the illusion of sleep. Tonight, I'll try again. I'll keep my eyes closed, my breaths deep and slow, no matter what happens. If you ever find yourself awake at 1:09 a.m. and the world feels wrong, and the people you love are not themselves, roll over, close your eyes, and pray that they think you're asleep. And now, another experience from the edge of sleep. Story 16. The City No One Remembers. Inspired by, has anyone heard of this city? No one seems to remember it, and something horrific might have happened to it. Sometimes at night, I wonder if there are places the world quietly forgets. Cities erased from maps, memories even from the hearts of those who once called them home. You could search old photographs, trace faded road signs, ask anyone you meet, but the name just slips away, leaving only a hollow feeling and a shadow of something lost. I am a police officer in a quiet Swedish town, and if you'll let me, I'll try to remember with you. I'll tell you the story of a city called Corona, a place that, if you're honest, you know you've never heard of. Part 1. The Forgotten City. It began with strangers, 2 blueberry pickers, lost in the northern woods, trying desperately to tell me about something they'd found. I pieced together their fear in broken words until an interpreter arrived and brought their nightmare into focus. A child, alone, deep in the forest, her body impossibly, heartbreakingly, fused with a massive ancient boulder, as if she had tried to walk through the stone, caught between 2 worlds. Her eyes, open to the moss and twilight, were both familiar and lost to me, her pale hair tangled, her small pink jacket stained in ways I will not describe. But what chilled me most was not the strangeness of her death, not the impossible way she seemed to have merged with stone, but the ache of recognition deep in my bones. Her name was Isabella, my own last name written in childish handwriting on a yellow library card. The Library of Corona. My world spun. I couldn't remember this girl, this supposed daughter, yet I could not deny the evidence, as if the forest itself had pressed a secret into my hands, daring me to remember a place that no longer existed. Part 2. A notebook from the other side. In her pocket, Isabella carried a notebook. The writing inside was not hers, but the voice of another, an aunt, perhaps, or a friend, someone who loved her, someone who tried with trembling hands to write down the story of what happened to Corona. And so, on those nights when the world seemed smaller and stranger, I sometimes opened that note. I read her words softly, hoping to remember what should not be forgotten. Helena's journal, a gentle, slow retelling of the city's fate. My name is Helen. I was once alive in a city called Corona, a place that does not exist anymore. 5 years ago, I was still someone young and hopeful, trusted to care for my niece, Isabella, for a single bright afternoon. We rode a crowded bus together, her hand in mine, both of us excited for the grand opening of the new amusement park. The air was full of laughter, music, and the smell of rain-wet stone. People bustled through the city, the old Freya Square alive with color. A parade, hot dogs sold from rattling carts, children pleading for red balloons. Isabella begged for a balloon, and I relented. She let it go, and we watched as it floated, a single dot, rising toward a cloudless sky, and then suddenly it vanished. I tried to laugh it off, but the laughter caught in my throat. Then the wind changed. A strange, rotten scent drifted in, and the sun seemed to tilt. Sirens wailed, and across the city, people began to look up. The tallest building in Corona had lost its crown, as if cut away by an invisible hand. Fear rippled through the crowds. We hurried to the river, caught a ferry with trembling strangers, all of us clutching our loved ones, watching as confusion became terror. As the boat drifted away, I looked back just in time to see the city fall apart. People running, leaping into the water, their screams chasing us downriver. In the sky above, something impossible. A great black bird, circling, searching, not of this world, reminded us that whatever was happening, it was not of our world anymore. Part 3. A world out of place. The city, it seemed, had been lifted from the earth and dropped somewhere strange. No roads led out. Only dense, wild jungle encircled us, and beyond that an unfamiliar ocean. The sun no longer set where it should. The stars were all wrong. In the days that followed, panic swept through Corona. Phones fell silent. Electricity died. People fought for food, for shelter, for hope. Some tried to leave, no one returned. Nights brought worse things, howling in the dark, monsters slipping through the old streets, shadows at windows, the distant thrum of wings. There was violence, yes, but also strange unity. A leader rose. People worked together, growing what food they could in playgrounds and parks, building new routines in a world without logic. Scientists searched for answers. No one found any. Sometimes nature itself turned against us. Strange creatures roamed the city, some ignoring us, others monstrous, hungry, leaving only silence in their wake. And then people began to change. Some fell ill, bodies twisting in unnatural ways. A rare few gained gifts, like a girl with a third eye, able to see through lies. But always the greatest threat was not what crept from the jungle, but what gnawed at the hope inside us. Part 4. The portal beneath the square. Years passed in that strange exile. Children grew up too fast. Most people learned not to look back. One day, hope flickered. A radio in just the right place in Fridia Square caught a signal, music from the world we had lost. Word spread. People gathered at the square each night, listening in silence to the sweet, strange songs, electronic melodies from home. A pilgrimage, a ritual. Scientists traced the signal underground to a narrow hole in the bedrock. At first, no one could widen it, but desperate parents, haunted by years in this broken world, decided to risk everything. Children, small enough to fit, were lowered into the darkness, sent back, one by one, with whispered goodbyes and trembling prayers. Isabella was one of them. Part 5. Memory's Edge. Helena writes, "Tonight I will take Isabella to the square. I do not know if she will reach home, or if home will even remember her. But this world is not for children. I hope somehow her father will know her, will recognize her face, even if the city that gave her life has vanished from every map." Epilogue. The notebook ends there. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I ever knew a girl named Isabella. Sometimes I see her face in dreams, drifting, almost familiar, like a city on the edge of memory, just out of reach. No one remembers Corona, but sometimes, if you listen closely to the wind in the trees, you can hear the faintest echo of music, like a song from a place the world forgot. If you remember anything, even a whisper, even a name, please let me know, because I am afraid that soon, even this story will be lost. Another story carried by the hush of night. Story 17, Teresa's Call. If you have ever lost someone you love, you know that the silence they leave behind has weight. It gathers in the corners of your home, presses on your chest in the darkness, and sometimes late at night, when your mind is unguarded and your heart aching, you may catch yourself listening for their voice. Just one more word, just one more moment to say what was left unsaid. This story is not mine to tell. It belongs to my daughter, Teresa. I tell it now because it haunts me, and because every day it begins again. Part 1. The Last Phone Call. I remember the day Teresa called me. Her voice was brittle, as if she'd been holding back tears for hours. There was a kind of finality in her words, as if she was calling from the other side of a closing door. She told me, softly, that she couldn't do this anymore. The loneliness, the pain, the endless days stretched between her and any hope of peace. I tried to comfort her, to remind her of all the reasons to keep living, but my words fell into a quiet so deep it felt like falling. Through my desperate pleas, she interrupted me in a trembling whisper. Daddy, Ray is here. Ray had been gone for more than a year. Part 2. The day the world changed, Teresa and Ray had always been inseparable. She once told me that Ray made even rainy mornings seem like a celebration. A man with a goofy smile and a pocket full of terrible jokes, whose joy for life was so sincere it was contagious. On a Monday that should have been ordinary, Ray called Teresa during his lunch break. His voice was playful, full of that familiar warmth. Why did the man always get hit by a bike on his way to work? Teresa, already smiling, played along. I don't know why. Because he was stuck in a vicious cycle. She laughed just as she always did. Not because the joke was clever, but because Ray's happiness in telling it was irresistible. They talked about plans for the weekend, about a little cabin in the woods that belonged to a friend, dreams of escaping the city for a while, leaving all worries behind. Then, a loud, distant bang crackled through the line. Ray's words faltered. Teresa's heart clenched with sudden dread. What was that? She asked. I don't know. Ray's voice shook. I'm going to check it out. I'll call you back. She never got the chance to say goodbye. Part 3. A house full of absence in the hours that followed. Teresa called Ray again and again. Each time his phone rang to voicemail. Each time hope drained a little further from her chest. When the police came, she learned the truth. There had been a shooting at Ray's office. 9 people were dead, Ray among them. The days blurred. Teresa drifted through the rituals of mourning, making arrangements, accepting sympathy she could hardly hear, existing in a world that felt unreal and far away. That first night, she could not sleep. The empty side of the bed felt cold, the world hollowed out by the sudden absence of his laughter. Part 4. The first calm morning light crept through the blinds. Teresa's phone, resting on her nightstand, buzzed. Ray, her breath caught. A part of her wanted to believe it was a cruel mistake, a wrong number, a ghost in the wires. She answered. Hello? Ray's voice bright and alive. Why did the man always get hit by a bike on his way to work? She pressed her hand to her mouth, heart pounding. The world spun, as if she were waking from a terrible dream, because he was stuck in a vicious cycle. The words tumbled from her lips before she could stop them. Ray, where are you? I'm at work, he replied, casual as ever. Just got out of a meeting. Things are looking promising. It was impossible. It felt like hope and terror all tangled together. Then another bang, distant on the line. Did you hear that? Ray said. And just like before, the day unspooled in the same terrible way. Gunshots, panic, the final irrevocable silence. Part 5. A loop that won't break it happened again the next day, and the next. Each day, at the same time, Ray would call bright and unaware, trapped in the moments before his death. Some days, Teresa tried to warn him, begged him to run, to take a different exit, to escape through the balcony. He listened. Sometimes, she'd pace her home, phone pressed to her ear, her breath shallow with hope, but always the ending was the same. Other times he made it home, his figure in the doorway, tall and thin, his eyes bright at first, but every day a little dimmer. He was cold to the touch, his skin pale, his voice losing warmth. They would sit together, holding hands in silence, Teresa wishing she could freeze time before the morning stole him away again. Part 6. A love that refused to let go. Teresa became the caretaker of a fading ghost. Ray would follow her through the house, obedient but hollow, like a memory she could not bear to release. Every morning she'd wake to find his side of the bed empty, the sheets smooth as if he'd never been there at all. Then the phone would ring. Why did the man always get hit by a bike on his way to work? And so the days turned. Ray's laughter faded into a rasp, his skin withered, his presence grew thinner, his personality unraveling into emptiness. Teresa clung to him, bound by love and grief, unable to let him go, even as she watched him become less and less himself. Part 7. A Decision in the Dark. Teresa reached her breaking point. She called me her father, and I heard it in her voice. The fatigue, the quiet determination. She told me everything. The endless calls, the impossible returns, the ache of loving someone who would never truly come back. She told me she was pregnant, months along, a miracle or a curse. She wasn't sure. It's Ray's, she said, her voice trembling, but I don't know what it is. I just can't do this anymore, Daddy. I can't. I begged her to come home, to let me help her find a new beginning, but she was already too far away. Part 8. An ending, and not an ending. Teresa's story ended as softly as a falling leaf. She left this world with quiet dignity, one hand resting on her stomach, the other reaching out for Ray, for peace, for the life that might have been. They found her the next morning, the room calm, her face at last serene. But the story does not end. Every day, at noon, my phone rings. Teresa's name on the screen, her voice gentle, far away. Daddy, Ray is here. The cycle begins again, soft as a whisper, the ache of love lingering in the spaces between worlds. If you have ever lost someone and find yourself longing for their voice in the silence, know that love does not vanish, not entire. Sometimes it lingers, gentle as a memory, haunting as an unanswered call, soft as a dream that refuses to end. The next story might feel a little too real. Story 18. I answered a 911 call that shouldn't exist. There are calls that never leave you. Sometimes it's a scream in the dark, sometimes a single word spoken in a voice you'll never forget. But what keeps you awake at night isn't always fear. It's the feeling that something has been let into your life, something that doesn't follow the rules. This is a story I wish I could explain, but the truth is I can't. All I have is what happened, and the way the house kept changing every time I went back. Part 1. Carol's Call. It started with a dispatch, soft in my ear, the radio hissing with the voice of a woman named Carol. She was young, 24, they said, but her words trembled with a kind of ancient terror. There's someone inside my house, she whispered, voice brittle as thin ice. I could hear her breathing, rapid and shallow, the kind of panic that sinks into the floorboards. Beck and I rolled out to her address, rain tapping softly against the windshield, the world outside muted and slow. We parked, made our way up the walk, each footstep echoing too loud in the fog. Inside, Carol's place was tidy, bathed in the watery gold of a single lamp. She looked at us with wide, pleading eyes, the kind of look that makes you want to promise you'll fix it all. We searched every room, every closet, even under the sinks. Nothing but dust and the hollow pulse of our own hearts. She apologized for wasting our time. I wanted to tell her it was all right, that everyone gets scared sometimes, but she looked so genuinely shaken I couldn't quite get the words out. We left her with a promise. Call if you see anything. Part 2. Back again. I didn't expect to hear from her again. But the next night, the phone rang, her voice a shade paler, a little more afraid. He's back, she whispered. We drove the familiar streets, but something felt off. The address looked the same, but didn't. Maybe it was the mailbox, or the way the porch light flickered. Inside, the walls seemed a shade too yellow, the rug a pattern I didn't remember from the night before. Beck looked at me, eyes uncertain. You feel that? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We searched again, nothing. But Carol's hands shook as she handed us her phone. I recorded him. I watched the video, the image shaking with Carol's ragged breaths. A figure appeared in the background, a tall shape covered head to toe in what looked like a black bodysuit. Smooth, faceless, impossible. It moved toward her, slow and silent, while she ducked into a room and slammed the door. The pounding that followed was real enough to make my hands sweat. When the video ended, The house felt smaller, as if the shadows pressed in. Did you leave the room? She shook her head. Not until you arrived. The doors were all locked. Part 3. The Night Watch? We decided to keep an eye on her house that night. We parked a block away, engine off, the world outside settling into that strange hush that only comes in the hours between midnight and dawn. At 2 a.m., we saw movement, a figure moving across the street, heading for Carol's door. Beck and I both leaned forward, trying to make out the shape. And then we realized it was Carol. We'd left her inside, hadn't we? Before we could react, the lights in the house began flickering. Windows flashed with stuttering shadows. Then my radio crackled. Dispatch voice clipped and urgent. Carol has called again. Says there are multiple people in the house. Need backup? Yes, I said, pulse thumping. We ran for the door. This time we didn't knock. We just burst inside. The house was a different shape. I felt it in my bones before I saw it. Hallways where they shouldn't be. Doors I didn't remember. The rooms pulsed with a quiet, uncanny wrongness. We called out for Carol, but the house swallowed our voices. Beck turned to me, pale. There's more rooms than before, he whispered. I started counting in my head. He was right. 10 rooms now, where last time there had only been 9. And in the basement, where there had been 1 door, now there were 2. Part 4. Something in the basement. The house seemed to breathe, walls shifting when you weren't looking. A knock sounded at the front door, hard and impatient, but we'd left it open. Beck's hand clamped on my arm. We need to leave. My radio hissed again, dispatch barely audible over static. Carol says you're going to die if you stay. The lights flickered off somewhere below. Footsteps pounded in frantic circles. I moved toward the exit, heart hammering that a figure blocked our way. Carol, her face blank, eyes glassy and wrong. Did you find him? She asked, voice as flat as a dial tone. I think he's in the basement. Why don't you go check? She kept staring, pointing toward the door, each gesture mechanical and endless. The footsteps below quickened, a frantic animal rhythm. We brushed past her, out into the cold night, breath steaming in the air. Part 5. Something waits outside backup hadn't arrived. We reached our car, only to see a shape looming at the window. Tall, black-suited eyeless. It turned toward us, and for a moment, I felt something cold move inside my chest. Beck raised his voice, trying for authority. Sir, please step back from the vehicle. But as soon as he spoke, the figure darted past us, faster than any human could move, and vanished back into the house. We locked the doors, hands trembling, and waited in the hush before sirens. When backup finally came, it wasn't comfort. Instead, men in black suits began to question us, voices calm and strange, asking things I couldn't answer. How many doors did you see? What did Carol look like? Did you ever see a man with one eye wandering around? I couldn't explain the way the house seemed to grow every time I entered it, how the rooms changed shape behind closed doors. They loaded stretchers not into ambulances, but into dark vans. The house fell silent again. The man in the suit told us to go home, to forget what we'd seen. Part 6. Something broken in reality. The drive back was silent, each of us trapped in our own whirling confusion. Beck finally broke the quiet, voice thin. Jack is crazy, man. I stared at him, lost. Who's Jack? The woman's name was Carol. He looked at me with blank incomprehension. No, the guy who owns the house. Jack. We stared at each other, 2 men living parallel nightmares. Part 7. The endless call. I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the dim light, the weight of impossible things pressing on my chest. The phone rang. I answered, voice barely a whisper. We need you. A woman dialed. Says somebody's in her house. He gave me the address. Carol's house. I stared into the darkness, knowing there are some places you never leave. some stories that never really end. There are calls that stay with you long after you've left the house behind. Sometimes, when the world feels thin and you can't trust the shape of your own shadow, you'll remember a house with too many rooms and a woman named Carol, or was it Jack, waiting just beyond the door. If you hear footsteps where there shouldn't be any, maybe just maybe, leave that door closed. Let's drift into the next strange occurrence. Story 19. Prison is hell. Some places are built from concrete and steel. Others are made from something you can't touch. Regret, memory, and the slow, cold crawl of time. I've been living in a prison for longer than I can say, and the truth is, I deserved it. But nothing, no sentence, no judgment can prepare you for what it's like to live out a lifetime here, and then discover that a lifetime might last forever. Part 1. The cage I sleep on concrete. The bed is a slab, hard and cold. The toilet in the corner never lets me forget I am watched, even when I am alone. The light above me hums and flickers. It gives everything a sickly green glow, casting odd shadows on the tile, making my cell look like a place half drowned in a swamp. The door is painted to match the floors, the same dull green, chipped and flaking, as if the years have tried to scratch their way out, but never found an exit. Every morning, I wake to the same stale air, the same thin blanket, the same itch under my skin that never quite goes away. I earned my place here, I know that, and yet sometimes I wonder if the walls are the only thing holding me in. Part 2. The compulsion. There are things I've done that I'll never tell another soul. You might think that in prison everyone shares their story, but some secrets are too heavy, even for these concrete walls. My whole life I lived by numbers. I counted everything. Steps, breaths, the scratches on my wall. The number had to be even, smooth. It comforted me in a way nothing else could. But the itch, it was always there. When the numbers didn't add up, when things weren't perfect, it would gnaw at my mind until I fixed it. The first time I did something truly wrong, I was just a kid, 12 years old, wandering the woods on my way home from school. I found a man, hurt and alone. I should have helped him, but something in me, something cold and curious, wanted to see what would happen if I did. Afterwards, I felt nothing at first. Not guilt, not joy, just an empty calm, like the woods after a storm. I moved on. I grew up. I learned how to hide, how to blend in, how to keep secrets that would keep anyone else up at night. But the itch only grew. Part 3. Blending in. If you passed me on the street, you'd never look twice. That was the point. I worked hard, made good grades, kept to myself. When people spoke about me, it was always the same. He's so polite, so quiet, keeps to himself. I learned how to move in silence, how to listen more than I spoke, and as the years went by, I kept the itch in check, most of the time, but every so often, when the numbers lined up just right, I let myself slip, and when I did, the world never noticed. That's the thing about secrets. They only hurt you when they're brought into the light. Part 4. How I got here, it all caught up with me. Eventually, everyone slips. I was on the road, hauling freight through backwoods highways, the night pressing in like a thick blanket. That night, the world felt emptier than usual. A single car, broken down on the shoulder. A woman alone, desperate for help. I stopped. I knew how to make people trust me. The right words, a gentle tone. She climbed into my truck, never knowing what the night held. That was my last mistake. The police were waiting for me miles down the road. They found the things I'd tried so hard to hide. Souvenirs, little pieces of a life I could never explain. After that, it was all questions. Interrogations and the endless echoing silence of an empty cell. Part 5. Trial and Sentence. The courtroom was cold. Faces in the gallery watched me with anger, grief, and sometimes worse than anything else, pity. The judge read out the charges, each one heavier than the last. The lawyers argued, but it didn't matter. The numbers spoke for themselves. 20 lives, a lifetime for each, but the judge wanted more. 1,001 life sentences, he pronounced, his voice echoing off the marble walls. The number stuck in my mind. It wasn't even, it would never sit right. Part 6. Yesterday, everything changed. Most days blur together. The same routine, the same faces, the same old ghosts. But yesterday was different. It started with a bell, showers, then back to my cell. But as I walked the empty hallway, I felt something shift. The guard was missing from his post. The air was thick, every step echoing too loud. A hand gripped my shoulder, too cold, too strong, and led me down the hall, through doors I'd never noticed before, until I found myself in a small, dark office. The warden sat behind his desk, face hidden in shadow. He read from my file, every detail, every secret, things I'd never told anyone. He spoke quietly, as if the words were just for me. When he finished, he leaned forward. "Do you believe in God?" he asked. I told him I didn't. "Pity," he said, "because what I'm about to say would make more sense if you did." He slid a photograph across the table. It was me, lying on the cold shower floor, blood spreading like a shadow. "You died this morning," he said. His voice changed, deeper, almost inhuman. "This is only your second sentence. You have 999 more to go." I tried to stand, to run, but my body wouldn't move. He looked at me with eyes I couldn't quite see, and told me the truth. "You can't leave. Not yet. You'll serve your time. Again, and again, and again, until the numbers add up." Part 7. A new kind of hell. When I left that room, the world felt different. The faces were less familiar. The guards never looked me in the eye. The halls seemed longer, colder. Other inmates. Sometimes I saw them, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I spoke to a man in the showers, only to turn around and find him gone. I tried to escape. It didn't work. I tried to end it, but the pain just lingered, never letting me go. I learned the rules slowly. If you hurt someone, your sentence gets longer. If you wait and serve your time, maybe, just maybe, you'll move on. Maybe. Part 8. Endless years. So now I write this, for anyone who finds it. If you ever think about crossing the line, if you ever feel the itch, remember this: 100,000 years on a concrete slab, 1 hour a day in a world that doesn't want you, 1,000 lifetimes, one after the other, with only the shadows to keep you company. I don't regret what I've done, but if I'd known what awaited me here, the cold, the silence, the endless, echoing numbers, I might have made different choices. My only comfort is the number itself, 1,000, now clean and even. If I ever make it through all these lives, maybe I'll finally be free. But until then, I'll keep scratching marks on the wall, counting the days, counting the years, hoping that someday the numbers will finally add up, and that maybe this hell will end. Here's another quiet account of the unknown. Story 20. We never open the door when there's only one knock. Some warnings become rules. Some rules become habits. And sometimes, in the lonely quiet of an old house, habits are the only thing that stand between you and whatever waits outside the door. This is a story about my sister Ruby, about a knock I almost answered, and about the one rule our town never broke. When the knock came, it was the first night alone in years. My parents were finally away, their first vacation since Ruby disappeared. The house was quiet, colder than I remembered. I'd been curled up with a book, letting the silence settle when I heard it. A single knock, low and sharp, echoing through the hall. Not the doorbell, not a series of hurried knocks. Just once, my heart slowed, then raced. I didn't move, not at first, because everyone in this old neighborhood knows you never open the door for a single knock. It's not just a superstition here, it's a rule. The first thing you're told when you move in, you can laugh about it, tease your friends, but nobody Not even the bravest kids ever opens the door after a single knock. I sat, listening, waiting for something more. But the house just breathed around me. Then came the voice, soft, familiar, older than I remembered. A voice that once meant safety, laughter, home. Please, just let me in. It's getting cold. It was Ruby, or something that wanted me to think it was. A voice from before Lala, please. The nickname I hadn't heard in years. My knees pulled tighter to my chest. Tears stung my eyes before I even realized it. I wanted to open the door. Every part of me did, for a moment. But I'd looked, just once, through the window, and there was nobody there. Not Ruby, not anyone. I pressed my forehead to my knees and whispered, please go away. But the voice stayed, pleading, softening like old memories come back to haunt the living. I could have called my parents. I almost did, but I knew they'd just rush home. And what good would that do? No one could help me, but finally I grabbed my phone and dialed Max. He lived next door, a friend I'd known longer than anyone. She's here, I whispered. Where? Ruby. There was a long silence. She knocked. That was all he needed to hear. You didn't open, did you? I shook my head, even though he couldn't see. I'm coming over now, okay? Patterns in the dark. Ruby's voice faded. The house felt emptier for it. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time slips when you're scared and alone. Then a voice outside. Max, calling my name, fiddling with the bell. Hey, Lainey, I don't think the bell is working. Maybe they messed with it. I didn't answer. You could knock, I called out, voice trembling. A pause. Then one loud thud, just one. I flinched. I didn't move. And then Max's voice changed, shouting, pounding, the tone turning sharp and angry. Open the door. Open the door. It grew louder, warping, stretching until it felt like it would break my eardrums. I curled tighter, refusing to move. Suddenly the bell rang, shrill and normal. I stood slowly and looked through the window. This time it was really Max. His face pale in the porch light, eyes wide with worry. Eve, remembering Ruby. We sat in the living room, cold tea between us, old memories floating up like dust in the air. The last time I saw her, we had the biggest fight of our lives. I admit, Max smiled softly. A boy? I shook my head. Jack was a stuffed pumpkin. I won him at the Halloween carnival. Ruby wanted him so badly, cried for hours when she didn't get him. But I wouldn't give in. Not back then. Sibling fights, he told me, were normal, but I couldn't shake the memory of that last day. The look on her face, how I'd screamed at her when she cut Jack in half, how I'd thrown all her toys out of our room. That was 5 years ago. Ruby would be 16 now. We'd never changed her room. Her things were all where she left them, like she might walk back in at any moment. But the only thing that came back was her voice, from the other side of the door. Vec, the rule we never break. Do you think I'm crazy? I asked, Max's voice thin. He just smiled, trying to make it feel lighter, but neither of us really believed that this was nothing. Not after what happened when we were kids. We used to play ding-dong ditch until the day Max knocked once, just once, on old Mrs. Telesky's door. His grandfather grounded him for months, told him the stories, the people who disappeared, the houses that went cold and empty. No one could ever say exactly what happened, only that the rule was never to be broken again. Maybe we were all a little crazy, but maybe the rule was what kept us safe. Really, the night stretches on Max stayed over, sleeping on the old air mattress, snoring softly while the TV flickered in the dark. I tried to sleep, listening to the old house creak and settle, but somewhere in the space between dreams and waking, I heard it again, a single, heavy knock from downstairs. My heart froze. Max, did you hear that? I whispered. He didn't stir. Then her voice, softer, higher, more desperate. Lala, it's dark. Please come and get me. I sat up staring at Matt. His eyes were open, wide, but he didn't move, didn't blink. He was awake, but frozen. I reached for him, shaking his shoulder. Nothing, only his eyes darted, frantic, pleading. Let me in. The voice screamed from below, rattling the pictures on the walls. They're pulling me away, Lala, please help me. Something snapped inside me. Panic, grief, hope. I found myself running down the stairs, moving like I was underwater, as if I was dreaming but couldn't wake up. My hand touched the cold door handle. I have Jack. They fixed him, Lala. We don't need to fight anymore. The words cut through my trance. I stopped, backing away, the air thick as syrup in my lungs, bitter as what never came back. I climbed back up the stairs, walking past my silent room, past Max, still stiff and unmoving. I went to Ruby's room, untouched for 5 years. Everything was still the same. The soft blue walls, her favorite books on the shelf, the old pumpkin toy, Jack, still sewn together, sitting patiently on her bed. I stared at the room for a long time. The knocking faded, the house finally quiet again. They almost got me, but the rule held. I didn't open the door, and in this town, sometimes that's the only thing that lets you see the morning.